Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is just a platinum cherry moment that we're seeing. This is just a special time for those of us in the truth community and just people who, you know, are aware of what's going on and like to see. This is comeuppance, right? This is where the rubber meets the road for misdeeds. And, it's not as bad as it's going to be in the future. And the repercussions aren't going to be as bad, but at least some humiliation has taken place here. And I'll cover that more in a voiceover, but I want to start here with George Clooney. There's a few things I want to show you about George Clooney, some other stuff that happened already, and then there's this big press conference that is supposed to be so important that I don't think anything's going to happen because Joe Biden is clueless, right? He's more clueless than he was ever in his life, and he's always been somewhat clueless. But in this moment here, I want to show you first, this is a person, Dana Bash, who is the co-moderator of the debate. And her and Droopy Dog, Jabe Tappers, are both more aggressive and more shooken by the debate because they were there. And there's also people at a fundraiser who saw this already. And the confirmation that's going to be given here by George Clooney and this other guy who is Obama's speechwriter is that this has been going on now since he got back from this trip at the very least. And it's probably when the decision was made to pull the guy. So let me show you these clips here first.
Their House Democrat is calling on Joe Biden to drop out of the race. Moderate New York Congressman Pat Ryan is now the 8th elected Democrat to do so publicly. Of course, President Biden has no shortage of critics right now. Some of his toughest are coming from those who worked inside the Obama-Biden administration, like the co-hosts of the podcast Pod Save America. They served as speechwriters to the former President Obama.
This is a campaign that is being, and a White House that is being let down by their principal over and over and over again. It was a terrible interview. He did a terrible job articulating why he's in the race, what happened at the debate, and why he's the person to beat Trump. He's doing a terrible job.
Joining me now is one of the co-hosts of that podcast, Jon Favreau, Obama's former chief speechwriter. And
Jon Favreau and Jon Lovett. Jon Favreau's an actor and director, and Jon Lovett, the comedian, right?
And the co-author of the new book, Democracy or Else.
Look, there's their names.
Jon's one-time
Democracy or Else. It's an eagle in a cage.
Former boss is also here. Former Obama senior advisor, David Axelrod, now, of course, a senior CNN contributor. Thank you both for being here. Jon Favreau, I'm going to start with you because...
So it's interesting, Abraham Lincoln is up there. I just watched Morning Joe. I was eating my breakfast in the beginning of it. And Gumby Joe Scarborough comes out and he starts quoting the Bible and Abraham Lincoln saying, "A house divided cannot stand." But the house is divided. The Democratic Party is divided. He was talking about the Democratic Party and that they'll fall as long as they're divided. There's only one outcome to this, which is Joe Biden leaving. But I don't think Joe Biden's going to do that willingly. I don't think he's going to be talked into it. I don't think it's going to happen. And so he just is so far gone, and he's kind of a prick, right? So, we'll see. Like this period of time where everybody knows he should go, but him and his team and Jilly Jill, who's, the C word. She's some kind of power-hungry, horrible person. And, this is, aside from being elder abuse, it's like unbelievably selfish. And, I'll get into this in the narrative. But this is what's happening here.
Because, first of all, Axe, I did listen to Hacks on Tap, so I'll get to that in a second. But
You're so funny, Dana.
I listened to the entire episode. I think you dropped it yesterday. It gave me so much anxiety. I could feel the frustration coming through the car speakers as I was listening to it, and then my earbuds.
Wait a minute. Breaking news. She started off listening to it in the car speakers and switched to earbuds.
And so the question is that I have for you is, I'm putting myself in the position of the Biden campaign right now, of the White House. And that is, you guys are so angry and you guys are so upset. Are you hurting more than helping? by saying so much about what you're saying publicly?
No, I think what's hurting Joe Biden right now is not only the debate performance, but the response to the debate performance.
Okay, so he goes on for a little bit. But at the end, they start talking about George Clooney here.
Replacing him at the top of the ticket could be chaotic. But here's what a top Biden fundraiser and longtime supporter, George Clooney, said about that in his op-ed this morning. Would it be messy? Yes, democracy is messy, but would it enliven our party and wake up voters who, long before the June debate, had already checked out? It sure would. The short ramp to Election Day would be a benefit for us, not a danger. John Favreau and David Axelrod are back with me.
So let me just say this. So this is, I guess, George Clooney has had a personal relationship with Joe Biden. And he talked about how he loved Joe Biden as a senator and a vice president and as president. He loves the guy and all these things, right? And Joe Biden in this, before the debate when he got this jet lag for going to Europe, and he came back and he had 12 days, he went right to Hollywood, to California, and had a Hollywood fundraiser with Obama. I think he brought in some like $30 million or something. And this guy was there, as was George Clooney. And George Clooney hosted. He was the guy, the main guy, right? So this is important because he's a big-time fundraiser and, famous person. I mean, George Clooney's a nightmare, soul-sucking devil, but, to these guys. And it was at this fundraiser, it was decided that Joe Biden was too far gone. And this is what documents it here.
What do you think about that argument?
Lincoln was a Republican. This guy's,
Look, I think there's merit to it. Sometimes this is all a matter of risk assessment. There's risk associated with everything. The question is whether the risk of the status quo eclipses the risk of trying something else. And I think we've reached the point where many have come to that conclusion. But the thing about the piece, Dana, that I thought was particularly impactful was Clooney, who just hosted a major fundraiser for the president a few weeks ago in California, said you can't win the battle against time. None of us can. It's devastating to say, but Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago, the fundraiser was not the Joe Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. That is devastating. That's devastating.
Yeah, and
and it's what people fear.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to ask John about, because, John, you were at that fundraiser as well.
So they're brutal, right? He's admitting to that Joe Biden was not the same Joe Biden in 2020 as he was in 2010, and that he was already showing slippage. And now he's a shell of himself, which we all see, but they all knew, right? This is the consequences of forcing a senile candidate on America, right? So this guy was there.
Well, I don't know if you spend as much time with President Biden as George Clooney did, since he was one of the hosts. But I'm totally with you, David. That quote was like, wow.
Yeah, and everybody knows that's to be true. Like, it's not, they need George. She was there at the debate. Like, they're around this. They all hear, they're around people around him. They see him, whatever interactions, they see clips of him. Like, we all know the guy's gone. Like, this isn't profound. Like, it's like they can't, that seemed like a real reaction from her. Like, she needed this George Clooney thing to put it into context.
It was not surprising to any of us who were at the fundraiser. I was there. Clooney was exactly right. And every single person I talked to at the fundraiser thought the same thing, except for the people working for Joe Biden, or at least they didn't say that. But I remember my wife, Emily, turned to me after the fundraiser and said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, well, there's a debate in a week. Either he'll do well in the debate and we'll think, well, he was just tired because he flew all the way back from Europe and that'll be that. Or he'll be like this at the debate and then the whole country will be talking about it. And so here we are.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. She just was, wow. Okay, so I already did this voice, however, you're about to listen to, and I just remembered when I'm editing that I need to say this. You guys know that my channel, like so many other YouTube channels in the truth community and out of it, YouTube sucks now, and they're, I don't know what they're doing or how much of it is intentional or just incompetence or their bots have taken over. But our channels are dying. My channel's dying. And so subscribing, resubscribing, hitting the notification button, bookmarking the channel in case you don't get notifications. Check on the channel if you want to see my content, regularly or whatever. Leave it open in some kind of tab on your one of your browsers or whatever it is, right? And leave comments and like the videos, and there's a membership program, all these things, right? Anyway, you have letting YouTube know that the content's relevant, so they'll continue to, not shadow ban me as much, right? But anyways, here's the voiceover continuing for where I left off about the comment there about George Clooney. So the media and some of the members of the Democratic Party, many of them, have now turned on Joe Biden. There was a decision made where you saw a switch in the coverage. And I'll show you a prime example about that coming up in the clip, but you've seen so many clips like this already, right? They're talking about Joe Biden being senile, possibly having Parkinson's, the word Parkinson's being used, that he has neurological impairment, which didn't happen overnight. So that meant we had a neurologically impaired president for the last 4 years. I mean, we've seen it, right? And so they're attacking him, but they're all culpable. Like, I don't know how many are aware of it. They're not how what self-awareness there is. There's different levels of people who understand what they're doing. Even people who know this is a game or know that they're shilling, they have controllers and they're part of a deception. I mean, this happens to actors, like the original guy who played Superman in the 1950s. He went crazy. People who think they're the role that they play. And we know this with also Stockholm Syndrome. And so even these people who know they're engaged in, a farce, they end up buying into the thing. They end up really hating Trump or really hating Biden, and they really invest, even though, they forget about. I mean, this happens to, like agents, people who are operatives for CIA and these various organizations. They start playing a role, a drug dealer or something like this, and they get into it and they can't come back out, right? It becomes their reality. They forget that their primary purpose, and it happens to everybody on Earth, that your soul sends you down here for a specific reason, and you get caught up in the illusion. And so when people just say, well, presidents are selected and not elected, yeah, that's true, but there is a drama that's playing out here, and most people believe in it to some extent. And what's real and what's fake, well, it's all fake, right? Life on Earth is illusionary. And the people who think they have power here, the people that we think have power, it's just a temporary situation. Like, power is temporary. Power is not something you take with you, and it doesn't necessarily transfer over generations. And even if it does, it could be pulled away from you at any moment. And so what we have here is a rare moment of truth, where a guy who has been senile since the beginning and has not been the center of attention. And that's the key here, because nobody gives a shit about Trump right now. Nobody's thinking about Trump. Trump is just like a rumor. Like, they're barely covering him. This is the first time that there's been 2 weeks nobody's talking about Trump. Everything's been about Trump for 4 or 5 years now. I mean, more than that, since 2015, for almost 10 years. And so it's all been Trump, Trump, Trump. They're center of the Democratic universe is Trump, and the Republicans and these things. And Trump has been the catalyst to drama and division and all these things. And they're not talking about him. This is all about Joe Biden. And when you focus on Joe Biden, you're going to see that he's senile. Like, I focus on him. I've been talking about him having some sort of dementia since 2019. Many of us saw it. And it's just because we looked. All you have to do is look. And now everybody's looking. And it's worse than ever. So you can't not see it. But the great moment is, like, everything that Trump is, Biden is now exhibiting. Because it's a Trump thing to deny experts. Biden forced people to get the vax with these mandates. And he forced people to get tested. And he pushed this allopathic medical model on so many people who didn't want it, and with the masks and all of these things, right? And he was supposed to be a man of science, and you didn't have a choice. You don't know my body, my choice. There was none of that. So many people were forced in the federal government, up and down the line, right? And so he forced them to take a medical intervention that many of them who already had COVID had developed natural immunity. And so that was the kind of prick he was. But here's a guy who's showing signs of dementia, and he's denying allopathic medicine, saying he doesn't need a test. So on some level, he knows he's going to fail. And so for a guy who forced all these things, and a party who forced all these things on common folk, people who now are suffering side effects from that, those policies, and they didn't get a choice. And this guy somehow gets a choice when he's showing signs of dementia. He doesn't believe in allopathic medicine or testing or any of these things. It's an easy fix. He could get tested by somebody independent for those 4-hour tests. I covered a video yesterday where there's a guy who specializes in Parkinson's, and he said he could see Joe Biden had Parkinson's 4 years ago, and that a med student should be able to diagnose him just from looking at him, because he shows all the symptoms. Like he's the poster child for Parkinson's. And he said there's a 4-hour neurological test that, Trump took a little bogus Trump one with some shill doctor, but they both could take this test, and it pulls for, cognitive decline. If there's anything that's there, it'll show. But also taking an MRI of Biden's brain and seeing where the erosion has happened, where the decay has happened. And both those things would reveal he has dementia. And if that happened, he should be removed from office immediately. And all of a sudden, he doesn't think about, the scientific medical model anymore. He's just saying, I take a test every day. So he's in denial. He's behaving like Trump. He had a spray tan on during the interview with George Clooney. I mean, he's copying Trump in every possible way. And now he's Trump. He is the Trump center of attention because he's being a prick, and he's not quitting when everyone that is in his direct circle, his power circle, is telling him he's got to go and knows he has to go. It's inevitable. And he ain't going. We'll see. The longer he stays, the better it is for us, because all of us in the truth community have been vindicated. We are, right to say that the government is a complete fraud, because they're talking about Biden and the Democrats saving democracy in 2020 and needing to do it in 2024. It's said over and over again that Trump is a threat to democracy. But it was the Democrats, and I'm not saying Trump isn't. Democracy doesn't exist, and it shouldn't exist. It doesn't work. People are stupid. The majority of people don't have the capacity. I mean, Biden did get votes, and Trump gets votes, and neither one should. Nobody should vote for either Biden or Trump, right? No one should settle, and it doesn't really matter who you pick. And you're complicit when you start voting because you're saying, yeah, this is good enough. One of these guys is good enough. And it's dishonest, too, if you're a truther. So no one should vote for either one of these guys. But, there's people who actually believe in Trump and Biden and can't see beyond it, right? The majority of people can't see beyond it. So why would you ever have a democracy? Like, the majority of people don't have the capacity to make good decisions in their own life. Every day they're eating at McDonald's. My wife and I were, we saw McDonald's. We were sitting there in a parking lot. And we were looking, and people are coming in out of McDonald's, and we're like, all those people are just eating poison, right? It's like everyone should know McDonald's food is poison. It's toxic. And it's just not McDonald's, it's Burger King, or it's Wendy's, or it's Hardee's, or it's any of these fast food restaurants, or it's all this prepared foods that you see in the grocery store that have carcinogens and things that cause, heart disease and all these things, right? And then all the rest of it. Like, the information's out there. And people just shove this crap into their body. People know what cigarettes do to them. People know what alcohol does to them. And so they're making self-destructive decisions about their own lives. They live shitty lives. They don't, majority of people are in some sort of, downward spiral. And they're not connected with their soul. They're not figuring out what their purpose here on earth is. And they're, just oblivious to all these things. And their level of consciousness is remedial. And so democracy doesn't work because, those people, and you look at people in the past, maybe simple farmers and, people who are, Aboriginal type people, tribal people, they could assess people. They would know that there was something wrong with Joe Biden. Like they would look at him and go, like, that guy is not, fit for anything. I mean, they would look at pretty much every politician and say, yeah, I'm not voting for him. He's not a good person. Like they knew. They were simple people. They weren't, they didn't have the kind of worldly knowledge that we have now. But they were far more evolved, and they were more natural and more, more of human beings than all the rest of us, right? We've gone down a path of idiocracy. So anyways, democracy doesn't exist. And we know it. Like it's completely manipulated. So that's like a joke. But in that lie that they say that they have to save democracy from Donald Trump, they rigged an election for Hillary Clinton against Bernie Sanders. And that's been documented by them, by their own interim head of the DNC, Donna Brazile, and what we saw. They rigged a primary for Joe Biden against Bernie Sanders, handpicking Biden and rigging it against Bernie Sanders. And then they hid Joe Biden away during the candidacy the way they wish they could now, and because there was COVID, and that was convenient. Maybe COVID was in part, they pushed for these policies. They closed down the economy in part to protect Joe Biden and hide him away because he couldn't campaign, because he was way worse in 2020 than he was in 2019, and he was already having multiple issues. And so remember, he didn't go out to the public, and it was in the guise that he was just being safe for COVID. It also showed that he didn't have the support. Like it hid that he didn't have the support that Trump did. He couldn't bring people in on a rally. They weren't excited about him. And so they hid him away, and then they, create this need for mail-in ballots that determine the election. And whether you believe it's rigged or faked, I mean, it's always rigged. Elections are always rigged one way or another. You could say that this one's being rigged for Trump. They need another 4 years of Trump to push their agenda. Who knows, what's happening here. But we know that the three things that Democrats controlled was picking a nominee, which was Hillary Clinton in 2016. They rigged it for her. Picking a nominee in 2020, they rigged it for Joe Biden. And picking a nominee in 2024, they didn't allow Kennedy to be a part of the primary. They didn't run Joe Biden as a primary candidate. And so they didn't let democracy happen in any of those three cases. And now all of those things are so obvious, with Joe Biden being a selfish prick, the people around him acting like dictators and not listening to the people. There was a poll out today that 67% of people say that Biden should step down. And I think some of the Republicans are saying no to that poll. I would assume some of them are smart enough to realize the longer that Joe Biden sticks around, the better. And so they said, no, he should stay in the race. So I think that it's maybe the majority of those people are Democrats, whatever it is, right? But there's at least 25% of the Democrats or more think Joe Biden should step down, certainly independents and things. And, this is more than the election. The guy should not even be president, right? I mean, if you're even having these conversations about him not being up to be the nominee and not to campaign, then he shouldn't be president. The guy has Parkinson's. And lots of these people knew it. And it's all coming, the lies are here. And, it won't come out like it should. I mean, people won't be held to account, but it's all of them. Because this shows that everything that they say about Trump, they do. Like they've become what they hate. And they already were that, right? Because they both suck. It's not that Trump is good. Trump is Trump, but they're just like Trump. And even worse, because at least Trump is Trump. But they're trying to say that, no, we're not Trump, but we are Trump. But really, secretly, we are Trump. Anyways, let's get into it here. We'll get back into George Clooney in a moment. And then, of course, this press conference is coming later on today. It's this morning. It's like, I don't know what time it is. It is 9:41. And this guy, it's his big boy press conference.
The president will hold a press conference, I guess a big boy press conference is what we're calling it, and take some questions from y'all.
This week, President Biden will speak to national labor leaders of AFL-CIO, hold a press conference, a big boy press conference, according to Justin Sink from Bloomberg.
The president.
So I thought this was from before. I thought this was old, but it was just put up 2 days ago, so I don't know. but hopefully he'll do his goodest.
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do.
He's the big boy. He's big boy. So this is pretty brutal. This is the new UK PM Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer. And you know who this guy is. You know who these guys are. You know who that guy is and this guy. And, well, first this happens.
I hope you're okay. Don't get hit in the head with the camera.
Try. What's the socket of that?
By the way, I heard.
Good news.
Good news is right. I tell you what, it's all because of the Prime Minister.
Not lost a game under the Labour government in 2024. It looks like it.
Well, welcome. And it's good that we had a long conversation
So he's going to, look, this guy doesn't want to shake his hand.
on the phone when you won. Give me your hand there, pal.
Give me your hand there, pal. Pal can be either a sign of affection or take it easy, pal. The pal is a double-edged sword with Joe Biden. But look at him. Look at how stiff he is.
And we're the best of allies maybe in the whole world. And we really need to continue
But he didn't want to shake his hand.
to cooperate. And a lot we can talk about. And I think that start off, we can talk about, you call football, we call soccer. By the way, soccer has become incredibly popular here in the United States.
It's just his expressions, right? Even when he's articulating things correctly. First of all, he's totally clueless because everybody's going to ask him about George Clooney as soon as this is over, and he's going to. It's like an incredible moment, right?
Really is growing, and but at any rate, and there's a lot going on. I think you're seeking closer ties in Europe is good for all of us. The Transatlantic Alliance. I think it's a great idea that we're going to be working together on. I thought we had a good meeting today, NATO.
Very good.
I thought we had
Very
a good
good.
meeting, and I think things are moving in the right direction. I'm feeling really optimistic about where things are moving.
Okay, so again, it's this low voice, right?
But welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And firstly, congratulations on a really successful summit. It's been an incredible...
So, he didn't have really any gaffes there. And everything he's doing, I mean, it's just his facial expressions, his low voice. People are now paying attention to all that.
really important moment, 75 years, a bigger NATO, a stronger NATO, and a NATO with the resolve that we need. I thought the medal, the honour for Jens Stoltenberg yesterday was a very...
If you watch his face while the other guy's talking here.
I thought the medal, the honour for Jens Stoltenberg yesterday was a very special moment. I don't think he was expecting it.
No, he wasn't.
And,
I owe him big. He was leaving,
He,
and I intervened when he was going to leave, and I sort of got my knees and begged him to say, no, I'm only kidding, but I talked him into staying, and his wife still talked to me. She spoke to me yesterday.
I had lunch with him when he was just
Look at him.
about to go to the central bank and was saying, I'm free. And then you spoke to him, and he's still in the job.
No, he's done a great job. Done a great job.
But the special relationship is so important.
It's so special.
Forged in difficult circumstances,
They call it a special relationship between Britain and America.
endured for so long, and stronger now than ever. So we're very pleased to be able to come so early in the government to recommit to NATO, to recommit to the special relationship, and to have the opportunity to discuss these affairs with you is really important for
For a
us.
figurative sense,
5 days in.
I kind of see...
It's like talking to a puppet, like to a character. Like Ali, like Sacha Baron Cohen or somebody, pretending to be somebody else. Or the old Stephen Colbert show. Like, it's not like talking to a real person, right?
Guys, as the knot tying the transatlantic alliance together. The closer you are with Europe, the more you're engaged, the more, because we know where you are, we know where we are in both countries.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And now we go into a cup final on Sunday on top of all of that. So, very
no,
good. I actually I began to watch the game with the Netherlands Prime Minister, but we left at 1:01.
Like, just the way it looks.
Well, you guys are still talking to one another?
We haven't seen each other since, so we'll have to
Anyway,
see.
well, we got a lot to talk about. So thank you all
So watch his face here.
for coming in.
He's gonna be asked about George Clooney. Watch his face. That was absolutely brutal. And, you know, he's having this chat with the newly elected Prime Minister of England. And all they want to ask him is about George Clooney says that you need to go. And he's going to have to deal with these questions later on today. And, you know, I mean, he's just gone. And that was that was him performing better. I mean, he still soft spoke, mumbled, you know, but he was fairly coherent. He made relevant chit chat with the Prime Minister. And yet, you know, it's not when you're looking at it and scrutinize it, you're like, oh, this is bad. Because he doesn't have any good days anymore. Like ones where you could say he's mentally competent and should be president. Then Gavin Newsom.
Hi, Governor. Thank you. Hearing you say that you're all in. But the New York Times this morning had an op-ed written by George Clooney, one of the president's biggest fundraisers and allies, calling you
Yeah.
out by name among other Democratic leaders to settle on a new candidate to figure out what it will take to go into the convention united. Can you please respond?
I have not read this op-ed.
My God, you haven't? Like you're mentioned by name and, you know, all of it.
Morning, I was frankly focused on the nuances and details of the procurement for the wildfire suppression underbelly on the C-130s. So I haven't had a chance to read it. Look, a lot of people expressing their opinion, and I respect people actively participating in our democracy by expressing themselves. But I don't have any comment as it relates to George, who I've known for years and years, admire and respect.
So you can't disagree with George.
And he's been an incredible supporter of Democratic causes, Democratic candidates for years and years and years.
So totally weaseled out of it, right? So this is Peter Ducey.
And this is extraordinary. Just a few minutes ago, George Clooney has posted an op-ed in the New York Times. I'm going to read a line from it. He says, I love Joe Biden as a senator, as a vice president and president. I consider him a friend, and I believe in him, believe in his character, believe in his morals. But he goes on to say he thinks that they need a new presidential nominee.
Wow.
Remember, just a couple weeks ago, President Biden raced back from Europe to get to Los Angeles for a George Clooney hosted fundraiser where Barack Obama was also there, Bill Clinton was there.
Look at how happy they are at Fox.
George Clooney is now saying that after he watched the debate, he wants a new top of the ticket. That is going to sting here at the White House and also in Wilmington. Sandra.
Another bit of big news.
Big news. You know, he talked about how the press secretary, Jean-Claude, was, you know, first wouldn't confirm that a neurologist had seen Joe Biden, or that guy who was a Parkinson specialist, and now saying for the past 3 years he's seen this guy, which, you know, would kind of indicate he has Parkinson's. And so they're pretty happy about that. So he shows up here with top union leaders.
Live with us full time. I look back now and wonder how my dad handled those thin walls. But at any rate, the point is that we just give people a fighting chance. And when I got elected, and when I was, and even when you guys are with me, going all the way back into the 70s when I was a kid, that what we talked about was the whole idea of this was to give everybody a shot.
Give everyone a shot. Give everyone a shot. Give them a shot. You did give everyone a shot, you prick.
Guarantee, just a shot, an even shot. And that's why I determined, and we've done it with your help and your leadership. We're going to build this country from the bottom up and the middle out, not the top down.
Not the top down? Like he says this every time. He's just a bumper sticker at this point, right?
No, I mean it. Not a joke.
Not a joke. I mean that. We're going to do that. We will do it. That's not a joke.
Not a joke.
Not a joke, just because you didn't hear me the first time.
I'm not. They're warning me not to take too much time with you all today, but
because I'll say something stupid and they'll say I shouldn't be president.
Of talking, but here's the deal. The fact of the matter is, take a look at what all the major economists, including the Wall Street economists, are saying.
What are they saying, Joe Biden?
They looked at his proposal, what he's done, and what our proposal is.
Who is this he that you speak of?
Moving forward, and overwhelmingly, got 16 Nobel laureates in economic law, and they won the Nobel Prize for economics. 16 of them. And what did they say?
What did they say, Joe?
They say his proposals are going to bankrupt the country. His proposals are going to cause a recession. His proposals are going to cause us higher interest rates. And what you and I, and you've been helping me, you've been either leading on, or I've been following you, or you've been following me. What we propose is growing the country. No, we're the fastest.
No, just don't take. No. I'm telling you, no.
Growing economy in the world. That's a fact.
That's a fact.
We're the strongest economy in the world. But here's what we got to do.
Yeah, that's why you guys are paying twice as much for groceries.
Got to talk to our people. Food prices are still too high because of corporate greed. We're in a situation.
No, because of inflation. It's not corporate greed. It's inflation because of the bailouts and you looting the government of money.
Situation where rents are too high. We need more housing. The whole range.
But we have an incredible economy, even though it doesn't seem like it because you can't pay rent, you can't buy food. But other than that, it's an incredible economy.
We're going to get done with your help in the second term because that's what we got to get done. So, folks, I've never been more optimistic about America's chances, not because of me, but because of what we're doing together. But
it is because of me, because if I'm not there, it won't happen because, it just can't be anybody else but me. So it is kind of about me.
We're better positioned than any country in the world to own the remainder of the 21st century because of union labor.
That's right. Woo! Woo!
I'm serious.
He said, talked about us, union labor. We're union labor. Woo! Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to have a conversation.
Put your hand in your pockets and look as awkward as possible. Why is he doing that?
And the most diverse cabinet in history. I think that
Look at him. This is where he looks clueless. When he's not talking, that's when it gets devastating.
goes sometimes unnoticed.
I promised I was going to have a cabinet that looked like America. And it does. More minorities, more women, more labor. I'm serious. Think about it. That's who we are. That's why we're strong. We're diverse. We're strong. We got to stop looking at it like it's not a problem.
I'm going to let you finish. He snatched the mic like Kanye.
It's an asset.
I'm going to let you finish. Boop. That was it, right? It got cut off. And, just when he was getting, into his rant mode.
That was Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi capturing the anxiety of this moment for the Democratic Party and its leaders. And really, anyone in the country gets to share in that anxiety who cares about continuing to live in a democracy.
A democracy where one guy who clearly is senile, look at, she's got a little fish girl. Where's she? Fish boy, go find fish boy, fish girl. Fish girl, go find fish boy.
12 days since President Joe Biden's debate performance, it's clear that everything is on the line. A sitting and very accomplished and successful president is now an embattled presidential candidate. He's vowing to not quit.
He's an embattled presidential candidate. Yes, he is.
To stay in the
whatever
race. He has told the nation that he will determine the fate of our democracy. Pelosi's comments, as you saw, were anything but an endorsement of President Joe Biden staying in.
We saw those yesterday, so.
A reflection of the concerns of members of Congress, who she knows better than just about anyone else on that end of Pennsylvania Avenue. Sources tell NBC News that Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries plans to relay his caucus's concerns to President Joe Biden. All that as another influential voice in the Democratic Party, George Clooney, who hosted a fundraiser in Los Angeles for Joe Biden, has gone one step further.
Joe Biden?
Even than Speaker Pelosi, saying in public what he says many Democrats are saying in private. In an op-ed he wrote in the New York Times,
George Clooney, I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee.
the Oscar-winning actor who saw President Joe Biden face-to-face last month made the sobering case that President Biden should step aside. Clooney writing this, quote, "The Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010.
Boom.
He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. We are not going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we won't win the House, and we're going to lose the Senate." Clooney closes with a final plea to the president, who he calls a friend, writing this, quote, "Joe Biden is a hero.
He's a hero. He puts the he in hero.
He saved democracy in 2020.
He saved it by rigging an election. By rigging a primary and then an election, he saved democracy. by not allowing the will of the people to play out.
We need him to do it again.
By quitting. Like, he needs to quit to save democracy. He needs to retire. Only you can do it, Joe.
2024. For more, let's bring in some of our favorite friends. Political
Okay, I don't want to hear from your friends. Okay, we haven't seen this guy in a while. It's looking kind of rough here, bro.
This just into CNN, big Democratic donor George Clooney, of course, the actor, has just called for President Biden to step aside. CNN's Arlette Saenz joins us now from the White House. Arlette.
It's Arlette Saenz.
Obviously, this is not going to be welcome news over there. What can you tell us?
No, it won't be, Jim. And this is a
It won't be, Jim.
significant new New York Times op-ed from actor George Clooney. Now, to remind viewers, George Clooney was one of those celebrities that headlined a major Los Angeles.
Okay, so we saw this. See, right now we're in this cycle, and I really like the cycle, right? Personally, because it's great for us all. And, you know, I'm not a pro-Republican or pro-Trump person, but like people, you know, with binary thinking, if I'm criticizing Biden, I have to be for Trump. If I'm criticizing Trump, I have to be for Biden. And not even criticizing, just covering reality. I mean, it's not just saying what's real, what we see, what should be seen by everybody, because it's just there for people to see. Neither one of these guys is a good leader. And even if they were, they couldn't save the country because the country is completely effed. America is, you know, morally broken down, and people are, you know, low functioning on every level, including myself. We're all, you know, low functioning human beings, dependent on a system that's collapsing. And, you know, it's that simple. But in this cycle, there is bad news. So there was the debate, right? Which was, okay, this guy can't run for president, right? He's got to go. He can't beat Trump. And more importantly, he can't function. He's obviously has some sort of, he's going senile. He has dementia, which we've seen. But, you know, then became a reality that the news media was going to be talking about things that everyone was talking about on the internet. So many people were debating this and seeing it. And they pretended like, okay, it's not, you know, this isn't real news. And it became real news because the debate was horrible. But then they said, all right, he's going to do an interview, so let's see how he responds. Most people were like, this is, you know, there's no recovering from this. And then all the insiders have been seeing this for a while. They know this isn't a bad day. This is a normal day, right? The debate was a normal performance. They saw him at the fundraiser, and they were like, it's the same Joe Biden we saw at the debate. So it isn't like, you know, it was a bad day for him. That's who he is now. And we could see it because then there was the interview with George Stephanopoulos, which was even worse than the debate. And he was in denial and hostile towards some sort of Hollywood inside Democratic power elite that were trying to get him out of the office. He was trying to rally the people around him, saying, hey, they're trying to screw me and you and, you know, whatever. He played the victim. He acted completely like Trump. He sported a spray tan. I mean, it's just bad, like on every level. And he was clueless. He wouldn't acknowledge that he needed to be tested and all these things. I mean, you saw, I covered it, and you guys saw it. You know, either here or somewhere else. But it was bad. And so then it was like, all right, he's got to go now because this was a moment of truth. And he's like, F you, I'm not going, right? And now George Clooney comes out. Now it's, he'll be some Hollywood elite. I mean, but he was just with, Biden couldn't wait to fly over to California and hobnob with George Clooney, who's, they both consider each other friends. And his friend has now told him he's got to go publicly. And everybody's talking about it. And, maybe a few more people come forward. But he won't budge. Like, I don't know what's going to take this guy. Like, I don't know if he's going to step down or they're going to have to remove him. I hope they have to remove him. Like, that's the best case scenario. But now he has a big press conference. He's going to fail that. Like, he's going to have moments, and just the way he looks and the way he acts, like, that's who he is. And everybody's looking at that now and scrutinizing it. So you can't hide it anymore. Like, they used to be able to hide it. They hid it in 2020, and ever since, when he was running for president, he had a good debate performance against Trump for him. And they had already said, Trump had himself said he was going to break down mentally, and he didn't. And they said he did a good job at the State of the Union. I didn't see it, right? But he overperformed. And, when the debate performance is the standard, and it's lowered the standard, and he performs above that. But now everyone kind of sees that there's always moments, and he's going to do poorly in the press conference, right? Maybe it won't be as bad as the debate, but it'll be the same thing. Now, you have the Clooney thing and the press conference happening, and they'll all go, all right, now we got to get rid of him. And he'll be like, F you, I'm not going. And so this cycle, as long as it goes where he does something and everyone's looking at it going, we can't run this guy, and, the media's covering it, and he refuses to step down, is a great moment for us in the truth community. It's because, it's already been validated time and time again, but this is just out there in front of everybody. And that everything that he did and everything that they stand for, everything they said about Trump, is also they can say about them. They are the problem, like just as much as the Republicans are the problem and the Democrats have more power. And that, there is no solution. And not that that's great news, but we know it to be true, and at least it's being seen by everybody, that there is no hope, right? Trump isn't the hope. Biden isn't the hope. Then what do we got, right? I mean, we're teetering on the, we're teetering on the cliff, and, you got a couple of guys both walking to the front of the car instead of going to the back of the car and weighing it down and being able to, pull it out of there. They're walking towards where the danger is. So I'm going to do some work outside, and then I'll come back and do the press conference. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock, a couple hours away from the news conference. So he's been out and about all day. They've backed up the news conference from 5:30 to 6:30. He's been here with all these people, so he hasn't got a chance to rest. And they've blamed George Clooney for his debate performance, right? Which I'll get into in a moment. So there's been developments here. Let's go through a few of them.
One at Russia's advances. You've imposed significant cost on Russia, and you made it clear Russia will not prevail in Ukraine. Will not prevail in Ukraine.
It's already happened. You've wasted all everyone's money.
And will prevail. And I want you to know we're going to be with you every step of the way. 2 days ago,
yeah, well, you're not going to be president or alive much longer.
Announced historic donation of air defense equipment to Ukraine. Today I'm proud to announce new security assistance package for Ukraine. This will be the 8th package I've authorized since we've signed the national security bill.
So the Ukrainian people have been devastated. They don't really have any army, military-age men left. I mean, their youth has been decimated, and they've lost, and there's nothing holding them up. He's going to say over and over again, we're always going to stand with you, and we're always going to be by your side. Zelensky says some shit or whatever. But the reality is this is a war crime to keep giving money and weapons to these guys, and so that they can keep putting their youth out there into harm's way. It's it's a really horrible thing. A waste of taxpayer money and a waste of Ukrainian life. George Clooney going after Biden is a little rich. Biden campaign tries to quash a narrative.
It is now getting some pushback from the Biden campaign. A source familiar with the planning for the fundraiser says that part of the reason that President Biden returned to Southern California so quickly after the G7 summit in Italy was because that was the day that worked for George Clooney. So this source added the fact that George Clooney is now going after the president for what the source characterized as being tired during the fundraiser is, quote, a little rich. The source.
A little rich, right? Now, George Clooney was whatever his schedule is, and, you know, I'm not a fan of Clooney, obviously, but whatever his schedule is, and whenever he could get all these people together to give Biden money, that's the day that they chose, right? And they're making it sound like Biden was pressed to go visit a movie star and his Hollywood elite buddies and a former President My Boss, right? Remember, he couldn't remember Obama's name. President My Boss, he called him. And so he went there because he had to. And they're saying that he was a mess because he was tired from all the tripping that he did in Europe. And, you know, he was showing signs of dementia, or Parkinson's, really it was Parkinson's. And so now they're blaming Clooney because he created a scheduling issue, right? And what Clooney said was the Biden we saw in the debate stage was the Biden he saw at the fundraiser, and, you know, this guy can't do it, right? Which, you know, I don't even know why there's still the debate about it. Like they're trying to, I mean, the gaslighting here is off the charts. Because clearly the guy's got some kind of medical issue, which everybody saw during the debate, and Clooney saw at the fundraiser, and he didn't out him after the fundraiser, but they probably were all talking about it, the heads of the Democratic Party, when they saw this guy, because they're all there at the fundraiser, and only Biden's supporters, his staff, were defending him. Everyone else was like, WTF, which you saw earlier. And so now it's Clooney's fault, right? Like, this is how petty and stupid they are. And that's the kind of stuff that Trump does, right? That's a Trump statement. If somebody criticizes Trump, they attack the guy and blame that person. That's exactly a Trumper thing. And they say they hate Trump, but they're behaving exactly like him because they're just like him.
Also said that President Biden stayed at that fundraiser for quite a while, for 3 hours, whereas George Clooney just took a photo and left. So certainly a lot of pushback here. Biden campaign.
What are you talking about? The guy's giving you money, millions of dollars. It was like $30 million they raised for him. And, you know, he was doing whatever he was doing. Well, Biden was there for 3 hours. George Clooney just took a photo. And, you know, I'm sure that George Clooney talked to everybody who was there, and they're all like, dude, did you see Biden? Dude, did you see what Biden was like? What was up with Biden? That's what everyone was saying there, because the speechwriter for Obama we saw earlier was saying that, right? Like, you know, if he was behaving exactly like he was during the debate, that's what people would be talking about, right?
Seeming to want to quash this narrative and really pushing back strongly. A spokesperson for George Clooney declined to comment on the record on it.
Yeah, because it's just bad.
Amy, Team Biden getting into this tiff with Clooney. This debate has gone beyond sidetracking his campaign message. When does this get settled? When do Democrats...
When he leaves the party, when he withdraws. I mean, he's going to have to do it. They're either going to have to take him out. He's damaged goods. Or he's going to have to withdraw. I don't think he's withdrawing. And neither does this strapping young lad. This guy who got Me Too'd.
Chris, and here is more from the Washington Post poll we mentioned a few moments ago. The latest Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll finds that 2/3 of U.S. adults want President Biden to step aside and let someone else run.
So I underestimated this because the Republicans are smart enough to realize they want Joe Biden to run. So that's 56% of Democrats say they want him to step aside. And it's only 11% of Republicans because they think that he will surely lose. And so that's like a majority there. That's an overwhelming majority. I mean, anything that gets close to 60%, I mean, it's 6 points over 50%. So half the Democrats, more than half the Democrats are saying, we don't want him to run. These are devastating numbers. And it's only going to get worse as time goes on, because the more he pushes back, the less likely he becomes, the less likable he becomes. I'm sorry. And so, well, here it is.
56% of Democrats say President Biden should end his candidacy, while 42% say he should continue to seek re-election. That's
So 2% is missing. So that's a little small number, and that's just the Democrats. That doesn't mean independents. Like, that's not enough to get a third of the vote. That's like a third of the total vote there, because he's going to need independents, Democrats, and some Republicans that hate Trump to win, and he's not getting that, right?
same poll finds Biden and former President Donald Trump in a dead heat, with both candidates receiving 46% support nationally among registered voters.
Yeah.
I'm going to just tee you up there, Joe.
Well, I just say, Willie, I mean,
Let's go to this. This is Chris Matthews here.
Your thoughts about this moment, where we are, whether this president should move forward, whether he should.
Well, he's aged. He's gone downhill quickly.
Step aside and open the door to the great unknown for Democrats. Many Democrats appear willing to take that risk and see what's behind the door. What do you think?
Well, I think we have to look at all the facts, and one of the facts is Joe Biden. He's a fact. This guy has earned his way to this position in life, the United States.
No, come on, bro. How? What did he do? Plagiarize, lie, cheat, sell his soul to the devil? I mean, what? How did he earn it? Sell his soul to the devil? I guess that's the...
President. He got here the long way. In 1972, he ran against Caleb Boggs, a three-term congressman, a two-term governor, a two-term U.S. senator, and he beat him. He beat him well. And he rode around in a car the next day and was celebrated for having pulled that upset because he put out no television in Wilmington or Delaware.
So you're saying when Biden was 29 in 1972, when I was, it was 8, I guess, back then. They didn't have television, right? Like, I had television. Well, television was there since the 50s, right? What are you talking about? But even that, he's like, Biden's so old, they didn't even have television when he first won.
He put out literature the weekend before, delivered by volunteers, which was a brilliant piece of literature. John Martilla did it. He is a politician who's been good at it. He's been reelected every time since then in Delaware with pretty healthy majorities.
Delaware. It's a small state. He weaseled his way into office somehow when he was 29. Maybe a Illuminati blood sacrifice. We don't know. Look at this dude. Look at this ghoulish effort.
In life, he lost his wife and he lost his daughter, and he found Jill. Now, who's he going to...
He found Jill, his babysitter, who was 18 years old and was married to somebody else at the time.
It's either Jill or George Clooney. I'm telling you, it's personal. He's had the elite, and it's so true about the elite. He is absolutely right about
the elite. You guys are all talking about the elite all of a sudden. It's the elite's fault.
About the elite. Look at President Obama. He served for 8 years loyally, and yet Obama backed Hillary Clinton for president and didn't back him. But I hear he never even invited him upstairs.
Yeah, but he gave him that BFF friendship bracelet, remember? they had a friendship bracelet he gave him. Plus, this guy, Chris Matthews, said when Obama gave his speech, it made his leg tingle, right? Remember? And so this guy, all of a sudden he's turning on Obama.
He had a good reason to be resentful, but he isn't. He puts up with it with the elite. But right now, he's got the poor people.
He puts up with the elite.
He's got minorities. He's got Hispanics. He's going to put out the labor. He's going to hold that base of the Democratic Party, which he will need in November.
So this guy's on crack. They can always cheat, and it's always rigged, whatever it is. We don't know how this narrative is going to play out. But Joe Biden has Parkinson's. And, the whole idea that he could be, that people would ignore his senile behavior, that's done. Now, there's a lot of hatred for Trump. A lot of people hate Trump. A lot of people don't want Trump to be president. That's all Biden has going for him because he's senile. And before they were covering up for him, but the media's turned on him, right? So that's number one. He needs the media. He can't do this without the media. And without the media covering up what's going on or pointing out what he's doing wrong or all these things is devastating for him. The second piece is it's already disastrous. Biden campaign fundraiser takes a major hit. And so fundraising. And so he's down. It says here, President Joe Biden's campaign has already suffered a major slowdown in donations, and officials are bracing for a seismic fundraising hit, with the fallout from a debate nearly 2 weeks ago taking a sizable toll on operations, according to 4 sources close to re-election. It's not just that that's happening, but it's that MSNBC is reporting it. They used to not do that. They used to not report any of this bad news. So Biden is now no longer being hit. His senility and his Parkinson isn't being hidden away. The media is going after him. These people are turning on him. And, even with this epic amount of votes they claim he got in last election, which were, either not real votes or they were votes against Trump, his margins of winning these swing states was very slim. And now he's got so many negatives towards him. And Trump has, Trump's still Trump. Like, Trump hasn't really changed. And so there's no way he's going to win. And he's going to, have these moments throughout the campaign. It's over, but only Biden and Chris Matthews and Dr. Jill Biden, those are the only people that won't acknowledge it, right?
And I'm telling you, people are going to end up rooting for him in October because he will have a comeback. And in this elite fashioned attack.
He's got Parkinson's, bro. He's got freaking Parkinson's.
On him. They're going to pay for it, but in the end, they're going to end up voting for him. So I think Biden will be the little guy. He'll be the Democrat in this race, the true Democrat. And he's going to get people to turn for him in October. It's going to be stunning. He is not quitting. He is not built to quit. That's what I think, and I think it's the most important thing we're going to...
Okay, so this is going to go really badly. I hope he stays in. I hope he goes all the way. And, he wins epically or something, even like that's a good story for me. Like, I don't care. Because either way, at some point, he is going to be completely gone. Like, he won't be able to swear in. He won't, he'll, whatever it is, like, it's just going to get worse. He's deteriorating really quickly. And the stress of the campaign and then having these people turn on him, all these things, right? And so you got this clown and these other people, these old school Democrats. Like, he's an elite Democrat, right? Chris Matthews is worth millions of dollars, and he was one of those, like, old school, whatever, campaign guys for somebody, like Carter or somebody like that, right? Years and years ago. And he got Me Too'd. And what about you quitting? You quit, and when you got Me Too'd. So there's that. But this is wonderful. Like, I hope he stays in.
MJ, you and your colleagues have some reporting on the mood behind the scenes. What are you hearing from your sources?
Well, Boris, there's certainly been a lot of confusion and anger and sadness inside the White House, across the administration, the campaign, and across the Democratic Party more broadly since the president's really halting and shocking debate performance. My colleagues and I have spoken over the course of the last 2 weeks to dozens of Democratic sources, including, I should note, senior Democrats who have spent real time with the president and in some cases have known the president for years. And what has been striking is that none of them had ever seen this version of President Biden that we all saw.
Well, that is striking because I saw him and so did the rest of us, and we didn't have closed meetings with them, right? Like, just what's up with these freaking people, man? Like, I mean, all these weird ghoulish expressions. It's a bad day for I'm good at stopping when there's an awkward face, but what's up? She's like been hypnotized here. And so we all saw it. And we saw it in 2020. And so to say that nobody saw this coming and there was a rapid decline is ridiculous. People have been reporting about this and showing clips and do you think it was wishful thinking or we just guessed right? Or we were wrong until last year and he did finally get Parkinson's or whatever. He's had it. The guy who, the doctor who diagnosed him with Parkinson's in the video from yesterday is, he said that you could see it in 2020. You could see he had Parkinson's in 2020. And so this is just silly. They all saw it. They've been talking about this for years, but they're like, well, American people are accepting it. You know, they accepted Fetterman. I mean, this is the rapid decline of American standards, right?
On the debate stage that was so faltering and dazed. And plenty of officials that we spoke with said, look, of course, we've known that the president has aged. He is certainly not the same person that we know from, say, a year ago. But what they had said, and that was so noteworthy, is that they said they couldn't have possibly known about the full extent of the president.
Yeah, of course they're saying that because they're politicians. They never want to take any blame or responsibility for anything.
Decline. And what many of them blame at this point is this apparatus and daily operation that is built around the president that is so painfully choreographed and stage managed, they said, that is designed to prevent the president from being often out in these unscripted settings for an extended period of time. And that really what that meant was that only a small circle of inner circle of advisors and perhaps family members could have known about sort of this full picture of the president.
Anybody would have known if they spent some time with him. You can tell when somebody is senile. Angry and stunned Democrats blame Biden's closest advisors for shielding public from full extent of president's decline.
Condition. Just one example that is in our story is that according to two sources, before cabinet meetings that the president attends, cabinet officials will submit their questions. And
okay, that's enough for that. Just silly. It's just really silly. You know, we all saw it. He was senile when he started running in 2020. He was wandering off stage. He was challenging people to push-up contests. He was yelling at people for no reason. I mean, he was just like, one time he was in a debate, he just turned around. He turned his back on the audience, and he would be walking away from the audience, holding the mic and talking. Like, who was he talking to? There's so many things that he did. So many gaffes. And not just gaffes, but things that were, senior moments. And they just proceeded to get worse, and they hit the guy away. They hit him away, and we still saw it. And so, to say that, no one knew. Of course we knew. Everyone knew. Right? Everyone knew this day was going to come, and now you guys are all pretending that you had no idea. Okay, so today's Friday, July 12th. Last night was Biden's supposed unscripted press conference, but it wasn't, which is going to drive the people who can see it crazy, which will be the Democratic elite, as they're called now. It was wonderful because it was clearly... the questions were, so tame. They were handpicked, the people he asked questions. Many of them had nothing to do with his being senile. And the ones that did were, they were so gentle. And yet he bombed. He started off the day where he had two major gaffes, but there are a lot of other small gaffes there as well. And so when he was introducing Zelensky, he called him Putin. But it's way weirder than that. Because then he realized it and tried to fix it. And I'll show you that because I saw that on TV. And Wolf Blitzer spent an hour asking experts about it, asking pundits and people about it, which shows, and I'll talk about that because that's a big change that happened. And then, he called Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. So he called Zelensky Putin and Harris Trump. And they didn't even bother to point it out until the very end of the debate, after Trump was already running memes about it that were going viral. But the problem for them is they have basically admitted they can't put this guy out there and not have some stage aspect or control to the questions and answers. And he can't answer questions. He doesn't understand the questions. And he's completely blocked out this idea, this reality that everyone sees him as having some sort of cognitive difficulties, and he won't, he won't address them. And they didn't really ask the questions. The questions were horrible. And he's changing the story where when he was interviewed by George Stephanopoulos, who really did a good job compared to these other shills that he had, where he said he has not seen a neurologist and not had neurological tests. Now he says he's had one every year for the past 3 years. And they're going to let those results out there. But he, when he was debating Trump, he said he hadn't taken any cognitive tests. And when he was interviewed by George Stephanopoulos, he said he hadn't. And now he's admitting to seeing a neurologist, a guy who specializes in Parkinson's. And he's just absolute oblivious. He's just absolute oblivious to the whole thing, which is wonderful. He doesn't know how bad it is. And so the Democrats are put in a horrible position because they got to get him to withdraw, and he's not going to. And there isn't, they have to think up another strategy. And it just keeps on getting worse. And it's all about him now. Like, people forgot to look into Trump. And Trump, to his credit, is, not pushing to be the center of attention, which he loves, and allowing this thing to, melt down. And, I don't have a preference, like I said. Like, I can't say who's going to be better. It seems like they want Trump now, the powers that be. The things are lining up for Trump to have a second term, which I think, if that's the case, then it's a disaster because they already have a plan, which involves Trump. We're fucked, right? So it's just a matter of seeing things play out in a way where these people are embarrassed or humiliated, and the truth comes out is basically all you can, all you can hope for. So there's a few things that I want to show you first here, like short things, and then we'll get into the press conference just to lead up to it. So Kamala sees the presidency in her sights. She's really sideways ambitious, but unelectable. I don't see her when she's out there and people got to take a look at her like they did before. And, there's months for them to take a look at her. They're not going to like what they see. But, this is,
This is the one. Well, this here is the one. This is the one. The most existential, consequential, and important election of our lifetime. Now, we always knew this election would be tough, and the past few days have been a reminder that running for President of the United States is never easy. But the one thing we know about our president, Joe Biden,
is that he's senile and going to die soon, and I'll be president. So you guys...
that he is a fighter. He is a fighter. And he is the first to say, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
Boom, he says that. He does say that. You're right. He does say that. When you get knocked down by Parkinson's, you get back up. Woo! Woo, he does say that. Woo, they nailed it. Woo!
No, many of us know what that is. So we continue to fight, and we will continue to organize. And in November, we will win.
Woo! We. She's saying we, not him. But she can see it. Like, this is a pathway to the presidency for her. And something, it's like, it's just working out for her in a way that it shouldn't.
And in response to those comments from George Clooney, Jake, a campaign official who attended that Los Angeles fundraiser tells me that George Clooney left 3 hours before the president. So clearly, the gloves are off. Jake?
But what does that mean, that George Clooney left 3 hours? What's the point?
The point of that is to suggest that Biden's stamina is better than Clooney's, and Clooney didn't have, eyes on the entire event. That's the response to the Clooney op-ed.
Okay. Kayla Tashi, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
So he's just getting bummed. Jake Tapper, like ridiculous response. A Trump-like response to George Clooney's, hey, the guy is breaking down mentally, and we've all known it for a while. It was clear at the fundraiser. A guy who raised $30 million for him. They didn't ask. He never responded to the Clooney thing. Because the press conference, I'll show you that now. I got one more thing to show you here, the other gaffe. But for Jake Tapper to hear him say that Biden has better stamina than Jake Tapper, George Clooney, it's silly. It's goofy, right? Like, why do that? Like, the guy's raised $30 million for you, and he's looking at you and saying you're senile, you're a candidate, and you guys come up with these little bitchy little responses, right? And one more thing about Kamala. So there was an African American woman who was a pundit, and she was on CNN. I don't know, I mean, one of the two networks. And she was asked about Kamala running for president, and she said that Kamala went to these various events that were in the black community. She went to her sorority, which is part of the, a historical black college. I think it's Howard or something. And the woman said she talked to a lot of the people who were there, so it was African-American audience, and said they like the ticket the way it is now, with Biden on top. And I'm like, oftentimes they say this, like they talk to a few people, and then they tell you what the people said. But for her to say that, she was pitching for Joe Biden over Kamala Harris and saying the black community was supporting Joe Biden more than Kamala Harris, which sort of plays out because you guys remember when Cory Booker and Kamala Harris were running for president and Biden was beating them in the black community, and they didn't, they were stunned by it. Like they saw him as being senile. You could see Kamala and Cory Booker being like, how is this possible? And so if she can't get support for people of color and she can't do better with women, she's going to lose other demographics. And she's just not very likable. And so, it's a disaster for them. But here's let me show you the gaffe here that happened before the press conference.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And let's get right to the breaking news this hour, a pivotal moment in President Biden's fight for political survival. We're standing by for the president's first extended solo news conference since his poor debate performance 2 weeks ago thrust his re-election campaign into crisis. You're going to see it live, of course, right here on CNN. Our senior White House correspondent, Kayla Tausche, is attending the news conference over at the NATO summit site right here in Washington, D.C. Kayla, just ahead of this news conference, President Biden only moments ago spoke at a NATO event on Ukraine.
He did, Wolf, and in a moment on the world stage where the president is trying to project strength and lucidity, he was participating in an event for the Ukraine Compact to celebrate the alliance's defense of Ukraine. And in introducing Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, President Biden had a gaffe that he'd been trying to avoid. Take a listen.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we ought to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President, I'm better.
As supporters of the president might say that's just classic Biden, but Democrats who are in the middle of a crisis of confidence in the president's candidacy for re-election do not want to see that. Although I'm told that the president has been holding calls, his top advisor.
So I was waiting for the debate, and I had taped these things. So I was going through them, and I found out about the gaffe because he asked somebody else about the gaffe later on. And apparently throughout the rest of the hour, he was asking all the people that showed up on the show to talk about this new gaffe. And so this is what they should have been doing all along. Because I started doing this in 2019. And I can show my compilation that I had. And I had multiple compilations. This is just one. And I stopped making these videos. I stopped, people were sending me Biden gaffes all the time. And I was like, well, they've already established that they don't care that he's senile. Like they didn't care in 2019. And I knew someday they would have to, but I stopped doing it because there was a gaffe weekly. And not just gaffes, senior moments showing that he was breaking down mentally. And so I have some of them here. I'll show you in a moment. I'll show you my compilation. But now CNN's doing that. They're looking for this. Everyone is. They're looking for Biden's missteps. And he does it all the time. His senior moments, evidence that he has cognitive breakdown. But just the way he walks is cognitive breakdown, right? And so now CNN is hunting this, right? And once you do that, you can't unsee it. For those of us who saw it, like there's people out there, I guess, that didn't understand that he was senile, that he had Parkinson's or he had some sort of, some neurological breakdown. I mean, people who refuse to see it or refuse to acknowledge it. But now the media isn't covering him, covering up for him, right? So when that happens, at least CNN, and to some extent even MSNBC, they're a little bit, worse at it. They're not as into it, but they're still doing it. And so he has these gaffes and these moments, and everyone's watching for him. And when that happens, there's so much pressure on him now, and he can't live up to the standards. And so let me show you my compilation, then we'll go right into the press conference. But this just shows you how long this has been going on. That people have been looking at. There's a title from somebody saying, some guy, I guess he's maybe a Republican pundit, maybe somebody truther out. This video was recommended. I think the guy's name is David Portney. He seems like a douche. But he was saying that George Clooney is finally realizing what we've known for 2 years. I've known for 4 years. It was obvious 4 years ago that this guy wasn't mentally up to the challenge. And here's the evidence. Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is a compilation of some of the gaffes, things that JoJo has said. Just a few of them. I don't think I have all of them. But just some of the gaffes that I've covered. And I know there's things I don't know about, and there's future gaffes. But as of December 2019, these are JoJo's gaffes, right? And, enjoy them.
We got to recognize that kid wearing a hoodie may very well be the next poet laureate and not a gangbanger. Ladies and gentlemen, there are too many black men, and I might add women, in prison. Stay in fact, anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry.
I was ready to prostitute myself. And
if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. We choose truth over facts. A big portion of it called Crimea. Right. He's saying that it was President, my boss, it was his fault.
This is President, my boss, it's his fault.
Do not put it on me, sir. Please, sir. Do not.
Look, why should voters give you another chance?
Because it got done before. Oh, God. It's your professionalism that I respect. Because it got done before. I'm the only one up here who's ever beat the NRA. They have every problem coming to them. We have to make sure that every single child does, in fact, have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds go to school, not daycare, school. We bring social workers into homes of parents to help them deal with how to raise their children. Play the radio, make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone, make sure the kids hear words. A kid coming from a very poor school, or a very poor background, hear 4 million words fewer spoken by the time they get there. There's so much no, I'm going to go like the rest of them do, twice over, okay?
Look at this creepy guy touching her hair, snoozling her.
Okay, right.
Just how creepy is this? Goes on forever. This
guys, look up and send a photographer up
This
top.
creepy MF. Get the porn cam. Get the grope cam up there.
Can I have one with Jess alone?
No, you frickin' creepy sniffer, groper, snoozler. No, you cannot. I'm saying no. Jessica cannot have a picture with you alone, you fucking creep.
Dad's going to stand pretty close.
Dad's going to have to stand pretty close. Dad's going to have to stand pretty close. And they laughed, right? Because they don't trust this creepy MNFer with the daughter, and yet they're just serving her up here.
By the way, if I were young, I'd choose parties.
So this was a clip someone put up online, but I found the original raw footage, and it took me a while to figure out what he's saying. This person gets it wrong. So this is, I ended up getting the original clip. This was like a hit piece someone put out there, and they misquoted Biden here. They say partners, but he says parties. By the way, if I was young, I admit I'd change parties for you. I am very serious. So he would change parties for her, a 13-year-old girl, if he was younger, because she's a Republican. It's just, really creepy. And this was in 2015 when this happened, right?
I was young and I had Parkinson.
I went to pin him. I said, sir, I don't want the damn thing. Do not pin it on me, sir. Please, sir. Do not do that. I went to pin him. I said, sir, I don't want the damn thing. Do not pin it on me, sir. Please, sir. Do not do that.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach. The only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate. A whole range of people.
No,
my point is,
that's not true. The other one is here.
I said the first. I said the first.
You didn't say the first. Let's go back. You said the only. He said, I said the first. I said the first. Look at Kamala Harris getting a big belly laugh here.
African-American elected. Come first. So my point is, the one
He's fucking senile.
of the reasons I was picked.
But the biggest one is he forgot or tried to lie about something that he said literally seconds earlier, right? He says only, and he goes back and tries to change history right there and says, no, I said first. I said first, not only.
Caucus, the only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate.
He just said only. It was only. We heard it, Joe.
A whole range of people.
No,
my point is,
that's not true. The other one is here.
Look at his confused look.
I said the first.
He literally just said only, and he got a confused look on his face like, oh, and then he tried to rearrange reality and change it, what he said, from only to first. I mean, it's just right there. Like, he's confused. Watch his confused face here.
The only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate. A whole range of people.
No,
my point is,
that's not true.
True,
The
Joe.
other one is here.
I said the first. I said the first African-American elected.
Corn pop.
They weren't allowed to. There was a 3-meter board. And you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there.
He's so funny.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
And he ran with a bunch of bad boys. All right, remember Corn Pop. This guy's the phenom, right? He's the phenom of gaffes, inappropriate behaviors, all of it. And there's a whole host of 2015 when he was swearing in senators, 2015 and 16, where he's touching people inappropriately, which is a part of that, right? Because it's like when you're drunk and you don't have, the first thing that happens when your brain gets affected by alcohol is the ability to perceive how others see you. And you start doing things like that, right? Acting the fool and doing these things. And, your inhibitions go down. And that's a sign of brain impairment, where you're doing things that are socially inappropriate and saying things that are socially inappropriate. He was doing that for years. Like he was, he might have had early onset Parkinson's in 2012. I'm wondering if Obama knew he was mentally gone. That's why Obama recommended Hillary. I mean, Hillary was maybe considered in better shape than Biden was in 2016. But here's the press conference.
United States of America, we are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters.
What an arrogant thing to say. We're the indispensable nation.
Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here.
By who? Your handlers? So the fact that he has a list. Now, if he was having a real unscripted moment, they would be all yelling at him, and he had looked in the audience and picked people and remember their names, right? That's a real press conference. Not having a list of people who are sitting there calmly and keeping their mouths shut and not creating chaos and confusing the guy. So that's already one aspect of staging. Plus, they've handpicked the people. And so we don't know to what extent their questions have, at least they have to submit their question ahead of time or what happened, right? But there's an evidence showing later on where he answers a question where I'm like, oh, he knew that question was coming. And these questions, although they hint at his senility, his Parkinson's, they're not the kind of hard-hitting questions we've seen asked to the press secretary, right? So this is staged to whatever extent. But still he fails.
Reuters, Jeff Mason.
He's a Mason.
Mr. President, your
distinguished guests.
Add 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests
There's a little background noise here. I like, how is that possible? I switched over from MSNBC to CNN. They all have it.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called.
As soon as he said George Clooney, he smiled. That's his fake smile when he's, saying, oh, that's that's his dismissive smile. Oh, I'm dismissing what was said. Oh, it's a joke. It's just a joke. But he doesn't answer the thing about George Clooney because he really can't. George Clooney raised $30 million for them, and they're supposedly friends. It's devastating, him saying that, because he said, and it came out, which you guys already saw, that the people that were there were all like, oh my God, we can't run this guy. And so it's pretty bad. And he doesn't say anything about George Clooney here.
Called on you to step aside. Reuters is reporting tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Boom. Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Thank you.
He has this tough guy thing where he's yelling, and he's like a total puss, right?
My question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president until I think she was not qualified to be president.
Okay, major gaffe there. Brutal gaffe. Really bad. And he delivered, right?
Let's start there. Number one. The fact is that
he's coughing already. His voice is gone. He's only one thing here.
Consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that...
So these are all he does a lot of, and I hesitated. I was questioning whether, I just didn't want to sit through his opening statement again. I watched it, with my wife last night. And he does a lot of perseveration where he says the same things over and over again. And he does this where he has these talking points. And this is one of his talking points. And he says this exact same thing later. He talked about how he was in the U.S. Senate a long, long time. He says the exact same words.
Senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have.
So he does a lot of the leaning into.
Now.
Lower numbers than I had now. And lower numbers than I had.
So there's a long way to go.
It's a long way to go. It's a long way to go.
This campaign.
So the question was about his ability to mentally be able to do the job. And he's talking about how these down party, these down ticket races, are nervous that he's not going to carry them. And he stresses this a couple of times in the news conference. It has nothing to do with what people are worried about. He never addresses his senility.
And so I'm just going to keep moving, and because look, I got more work to do. We got more work to finish. There's so much. We've made so much progress.
So he doesn't address the George Clooney thing. It was a poorly asked question, and they should have come back. And the fact that he just called Biden, the fact that he called Vice President Harris Vice President Trump in his first question after confusing Zelensky and Putin. They're going to bring up the Zelensky and Putin thing, but they don't come back to that, right? These are supposed to be people who are, watching what's being said. They should have called him immediately. They bring up the Putin thing with Zelensky later on, but, that's a major gaffe.
Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million.
He said this already. He said these things already in the beginning of this, the statement. And this is how he answers it. He answers it based on what he thinks he's accomplished, not based on that people are seeing that he is senile, that he has some kind of neurological disorder, right? He's breaking down mentally. And he's not ever addressing that. He didn't address it with George Stephanopoulos. He hasn't addressed it on the campaign trail. He just keeps on saying, look at my record. And people are like, no, that's not what we're talking about, bro. Right?
Things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. Their prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down. And so I'm optimistic about where things are going.
So he's going to talk about that with the food prices, that it's corporate greed. That's his excuse, not the bailouts. And he's going to say this again later. So he got confused there. He didn't know what was going on. Somebody asked me a question. Oh, no, I got a list here.
Daddy Kemp, AFP.
And it's just his affect, right? So, everyone should be like, this is how Biden is now. This is what he's like.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about you mixed up Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today.
Okay, so again, that dismissive laugh. And if this was a real question, the guy would have said, and now you just messed up Harris, and you called Kamala Harris Trump. You just did it again, twice in one day. But he doesn't do that because they're very lame questions, very tame questions, too. It's just it's very pre-staged, and he's still going to fail.
And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, and the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. Officials here are saying off the record...
Oh, that's puzzling. Oh, what are you talking about? Oh, what? Huh?
...that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference?
This is probably the hardest question in the whole thing. Saying your decline has become noticeable and embarrassing.
Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys.
He's going to talk about how successful the conference was. And not that his behaviors, because he's unaware of it. They're not telling him what people are seeing. He has no idea what he looks like up there and how people are seeing. And he said he didn't even watch the debate, which I don't know why in the world you wouldn't watch the debate to understand where people are at, right?
The idea anybody suggests that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference.
No, they're talking about your mental decline. That was the question.
How many times did you hear in that conference, I don't know if it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden.
Oh, wow, they gave you a compliment? That means you're not senile?
because Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is, well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time, and find me a world leader who didn't think it was.
You know, that's not answering the question, and he never does. It's about your senility. It's about your Parkinson's.
Next one. Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you...
Again with a smile, dismissing their concerns. Like they're ridiculous. Look, who would even say such a thing? And he's been senile for years now, right? He's been making weird, having, inappropriate social interactions and saying things that are, he's been like this for years. And the decline is, recently, just the way he walks, the way he stares. It's gotten worse. And the doctor who talked about Parkinson's in my last video, the way he talked about it, it's like, yeah, he's got Parkinson's, right? So this is a good first start to her question. She's talking about his decline and how it's his friends and allies that are questioning him. But then she just does this pivot here.
Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have, and you lose to someone who you yourself have argued is unfit to return to the Oval Office?
Well, look, I'm not in this for my legacy.
You see, it's a bad question. Who gives a shit about his legacy? We got a mentally incompetent president, and his friends are now turning on him. The mainstream media is covering him in a different way, and ask about that, right? We just leave it at that, not his legacy. Why bring up his legacy? It gives him a chance to say, "I'm not into it for my legacy. I'm here to complete the job."
I'm in this to complete the job I started.
I'm in this to complete the job I started. I'm in this to complete my job I started. A job it started. I'm in this for a legacy.
As you recall,
like she should have focused on your friends are the ones saying you need to go. They're not the elite. These are people who have donated millions of dollars like Clooney. He was having a fundraiser for you. They don't ask. He has still not addressed the Clooney thing. He still hasn't. And he won't through this whole, this whole press conference, that was the big, the elephant in the room was Clooney. He just dropped his New York Times editorial thing yesterday. And so he should have been able to, they should have said, all right, this is news. And they just rolled over it. And now he's just going on, on his own little rants here.
Understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward can't do that. It's going to cause inflation. Things are going to skyrocket.
What are those 12 experts or 60 economists saying now?
Debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now?
What are you hearing now?
From mainstream economists. 16
of them. They're all saying, there's 16. There's 16 economists out there saying.
Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job.
That's what they said. That's their professional opinion.
And under my plan so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better.
You're going to get much better.
Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected.
Economy is much better. There's 16 Nobel laureates. Say I'm doing a hell of a job. I'm doing a hell of a job.
To stop the trickle-down economic theory.
Which is under Reagan. That was Reagan's thing.
That if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well.
But he doesn't believe that. What do you believe? You believe that you build it from the middle class out.
My dad was a well-read, decent guy.
He was a decent guy. He's a decent man like them. Decent.
I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table.
Except for me. I trickled down on his kitchen table quite a bit. Don't mind.
Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator.
What is it? Is it built in from the middle class up?
And that is that The way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up.
The middle out and the bottom up. The middle out and the bottom up. That's what I do. Middle out and bottom up. I'm bottom up. I always like the bottom up.
That way, we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well.
The wealthy do well, too. We all do well. Because it's this thing I do. To do it. He just says these things over and over again in each interview he does, right? Or whatever it is, right? Speeches.
They do fine.
They do fine. They do fine. It has nothing to do with your senility, right?
And guess what?
What? What, Joe? What, Joe? What happened?
Find me an economist, a mainstream economist who said we haven't done well.
Find me. There's not. Find me a foreign leader that said that this conference was the best, greatest conference they ever had in their life. The hookers were like, and the coke was incredible.
What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so
What have we not done? We've done it all. Why don't you guys know talking about this? I'm clearly senile. I mean, not senile.
What to do though? We
I don't have Parkinson's. Who said so?
It's a job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world.
By the way,
Delaware has more corporations registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined.
So I thought this was BS, but my wife said, no, there's an article she saw that they all register there. Like there's 1,000 companies registered in one little brick building because of tax breaks. And so he's talking about how Delaware helps these corporates evade the taxes that he's trying to raise on them because his home state allows them to not pay these taxes. That's why they all register in this small little inky-dink state of Delaware.
Not anti-corporate, but corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. Doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit. It's time, for example.
Yeah, because the money's gone to the elite. And your economic plan, and you're sabotaging Trump's economy. And Trump's economy sucked too. It was a fake economy that was, doomed because he had deregulated everything. But, like he's gone. And he's just claiming things. People they're upset about food prices and rent and things like this, which is on him. And he's blaming corporate greed.
If I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase. Corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about because we're going to continue to grow this economy. And by the way,
he says this all the time. By the way.
I know, remember how I got so roundly criticized for being so pro-union? Not labor, union. Union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history.
Yeah, I have.
Not a joke.
Not a joke.
Guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better.
Yes, I do.
Everybody does better. And we talk about for example, remember when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States?
Yeah, we talked about that.
It
Remember
used to
that
be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry was in the United States.
And where's it now?
Former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product over there, and import what the product was.
Exactly. That's what we did. They did. And I never agreed with it. I didn't do.
And so what did I do?
What did I do?
I was told not to go over to Europe. To Asia.
Europe.
But Asia. And I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion.
$20 billion. $20 billion. He's rambling like no one knows what the fuck you're talking about, bro.
The United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world and you have the best workers in the world.
American workers are the best workers. That's why. Is that what you're saying? Nobody believes that, Joe. Like, what are you talking about? That's why there's immigration, because people are coming to America that they'll do jobs Americans won't do. That's why people come to America, the brain drain in countries like India and these other countries, because there's, the American kids don't want to do math. We don't have the best workers. Like, no one believes that. What are you talking about?
So the whole idea here is we've invested, there's over $50 billion in investment in computer chip manufacturing just coming in the bean. None of you thought that would happen.
No, none of you thought that would happen. None of you did. No, you see, just me.
None of you thought that would happen.
None of you thought that would happen.
But it's happening.
It's happening.
It's happening.
It's happening.
And it's going to grow economies.
Let me touch my nose.
All through. And by the way,
By the way.
red states and blue states.
No blue
Matter of
states.
fact, there's as much in red states as in blue states. I've made no distinction.
He's made no
So my
distinction.
generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fairer. And like I said, from my standpoint, when the middle class does well, that's when the whole economy grows.
Let's build it from the middle out and the bottom up. The middle out and the bottom up.
More of a shot, the wealthy do well. But the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
Okay, so that question was about how his friends are the one who are criticizing him and calling for him to step down, and his legacy. And that's what he said, right? All this stuff that like people don't agree with, it's just, stuff that he say. These are stump speeches that they say, over and over again. This is no malarkey stuff right here.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate
See, he's just confused, right? Look at his face. Look at his fucking face there.
on that? What is it about her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies.
Exactly. Freedom of women's bodies to do whatever they want with freedom of their bodies.
Secondly, her
You
ability
mean abortion.
to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good.
She was a first-rate person. And she was good in the Senate, too, for like one term.
I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning. I made no bones about that.
Okay, so just silly. The reason he picked her was first he said he was going to pick a woman, and then he's going to pick a woman of color. And Kamala was the best choice for him. Plus, she was insurance policy because she was unelectable. And even Trump is saying that now. I've been saying that for years. Now Trump is saying that because people said, oh, we don't want Kamala as president. And so she wasn't able, she was an insurance policy that people didn't want to get rid of him for her. And now they do because there's no other choice. And so, but what stupid thing to say. I picked her from day one. I knew she could be president. Yeah, that's what vice president is. Like if something happens to you, she's a backup plan, right? Like you don't even have to say that. Like it's just silly. All the stuff he just said is just nonsense, right?
She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her.
But not, as qualified as me.
Felicia Schwartz, Financial
Felicia Schwartz.
Times.
He has trouble finding the names. He's getting lost in the process. But imagine if they were all shouting stuff at him. He had to look at their faces and pick people. Like what would be happening. This is not an unscripted event, right? This is, this is handled as much as it can be.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true.
That's not true. Even though I said it, it's not true.
Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, just earlier.
People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate.
Oh, man, that's what you're saying. You were showing signs of senility. You do not understand why people are freaked out. No, you don't, because you're senile. You got Parkinson's. You have neural degeneration.
I mean, my schedule has been full bore.
Full board. It's been full board.
I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball?
Where's Trump been? He's been on his golf cart. He fills out the scorecard before he even hits the ball. That's cheating. He's a cheater, that Trump. In his golf cart, he isn't just sitting back doing nothing. The guy isn't having big rallies and going out there and being the center of attention. It's me, and it's great from now and now. And everyone thinks about me. It's not so great. He's been saying this over and over again. And CNN was putting we were watching it on like CNN cable news thing, not on YouTube. And they were putting up these things that he was saying, like they were news, like there was like rocket it.
I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing.
Done virtually nothing. One thing I want to say about this is that there's some kind of rule here, and I'm a little bit, I'm not a political person. Like I cover it and mock it, but I have a good memory. But there's some kind of rule that a sitting president, isn't supposed to use like the State of the Union or official press conference for campaigning, because it's unfair, because he's getting free coverage, right? And so I'm not, I'll go check the rule and I'll come back. I'll stop here, but let me just do that. So here's the rule here: the general prohibition against using official resources for campaign or political purposes. And it goes on here for a lot of things, but the rule specifically is this one. Section 315 of the Federal Communication Law of the section requires any license of broadcast station who permits any person who is legally qualified candidate for public office to use broadcasting station to afford equal opportunities to all other candidates for that office in the use of such broadcasting station for the period of the 1960 presidential and vice presidential campaigns with respect to nominees for the office of President and Vice President of the United States. And so what this means is that if you're using an official event like a press conference and you use it as a campaign event, now he's calling out Trump, he's comparing himself to Trump, he's talking about running for president. Now Trump doesn't have all these news stations and now all these, not just network news and cable news, but also what's being covered on the internet. So he has this press conference that everyone's watching, and he's using it for campaigning, and he isn't paying them to run advertisements. So this isn't his coming out of his advertising budget, and that's not what's supposed to happen. You're not supposed to use these official events to campaign, and they do it subtly, but this whole thing is a campaign speech, right? Telling him what a great job he's done and how much better he is than Trump. And he mentioned him in the official statement in the beginning. And so, this is a press conference where maybe he mentioned Trump because he's, some of these questions are pertinent about Trump, and somebody asked him a question about Trump. But, some of these other things that he's doing here is, I believe, a violation of this law, where he's using an official event to campaign against Trump, right? And again, he's not doing a good job. So, he's being scrutinized and he's failing, but, it's there. So I just took a break and was talking about this with my wife, and she also pointed out that not only were the questions, they handpicked these people, but they handpicked them in order. Like he knew which person was going to ask which question. There's just levels of preparation. And if I know it's staged, if people watching it know it's staged, and we're not political experts, we're not a part of that, right? Like they know how to stage things because they do it all the time. And so if I see it, then the people who are pulling their hair out because Joe Biden won't acknowledge that he's got to leave the race, the insiders, the so-called Democratic elite, the George Clooneys and these other people, Pelosi now, Obama, they're talking about these things behind closed doors, according to CNN. This is driving them nuts. When he says it's an unscripted event, he comes out and it's completely handled, and he's just saying the same things over and over again, right? And him saying these things like, we have the best Nobel laureates. They all say Nobel laureates. We have the best economy. We have the best people. Have you ever seen a conference like this? Hey, it's the best conference. And find me a foreign leader that didn't say this was the best conference. When he says stuff like that, that's what Trump says. We have the best people, right? The things that Trump says. Bragging about his accomplishments, and that's all he does. He brags about the work he's done as president, and I don't think that he's been successful as president. Most people don't, but there's some in the Democratic Party that do. But that's not what's being talked about here. Whether you think he's a failure or a success, it's about whether his there's neural degeneration. He's got Parkinson's, and he's refusing to answer these questions. And I also turned on the news when I was watching, I was eating breakfast, and they were talking about how the media, the press corps, is frustrated that Biden didn't come out and answer questions after the disastrous debate. That he waited and did the George Stephanopoulos thing, a week later, and then now this. And they're frustrated with the press secretary, right? Karine Jean-Pierre. And so they're really frustrated by, none of the major networks, MSNBC and CNN, weren't called on. And Fox, the Peter Ducey was sitting there. And so they called on people like the BBC and some guy from Poland he calls on, right? And so where are the people that are in the major networks there? ABC, NBC News, and CBS. He didn't call on any of them. And there was just such a tame and lame press conference. It's just completely staged. It's staged in a way where the questions are mild and tame. He had foreknowledge, and he's just able to spin and run his game here. It's something that's not allowed. It's against the rules. He's taking advantage of, that he is on TV, and he's campaigned against Trump. Of course, it's a failure because it just shows more and more that he's out of touch. Now, I'm not qualified to diagnose someone with Parkinson's, but that guy who was interviewed on CNN clearly knew what he was talking about. But I can read people and look at people, and so can you, so anybody can. And you see his affect. I said this maybe a month or two ago. I hadn't seen him in a while. I had been covering the political situation. I was like, oh my God, he's like a deer in headlights. I've been saying this for a few months. He's just, something happened where his condition got way worse. But it's always been there. And his facial expressions, when you can see it when he's being asked a question or when Trump was talking at the debate, and he's not doing a good job just not talking, right? He can't talk, but he can't not talk either.
And I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events, some of them with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to pace myself a little more. Pace myself.
You weren't doing anything. He didn't have any events before the debate. He went to Camp David. He went to a vacation spot, a secluded vacation spot for the president, and he was with his family, and he was preparing for the debate. There was no major events, and that wasn't the cause of it, right? He's just...
In the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before.
2 weeks before. Nobody, maybe there's people who buy this, but very few people.
Anyway, that's what it was about. That's what it was about. And by the way, even with that, I love my staff, but they add things all the time. At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway.
Really? See, he's just a bad decision there. So he's trying to be chatty and make himself more human, but he just threw his staff under the bus. He's saying that they're managing him, but they're still adding events, and his wife is getting pissed off because she thinks he's doing too much, right? And, he had plenty of time to prepare for the debate. He was just the moment of oh, okay, he just phased out. Where did he go? He just, check out, he just glitched out here.
At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway.
What's going on? Okay.
I'm sorry, Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions.
So Reuters and Associated Press are both owned by Rothschilds, whatever their media company is. And they're not, they're not the news that regularly covers him.
For you first.
The CBS, the NBC, the MSNBC, CNN, and Fox.
The NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that...
And this is what are you doing, bro? Why are you asking about... his whole speech was about NATO and how he saved NATO, and Trump wants to get rid of NATO, and all these things. And so why are you asking about this? We're talking about him, the only story here is his mental competence. No one's going to cover your question unless he has a major gaffe. And so why are you talking about NATO? Few people start talking about NATO now. And that's what he wants, right? He wants to make this about NATO because he's saying that NATO is a winning issue for him because Trump wants to get rid of it, right?
Public remarks afterwards saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not, if he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't.
Okay, why wouldn't it? He's at war. Why wouldn't it make sense? And, this would be World War III, but why wouldn't it be? Look at him. Look at his frickin' face.
The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, and the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten a more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity, and so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief.
You're the commander-in-chief. Who's your commander-in-chief? Dude, who's your commander-in-chief? I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief? Let's watch that again. These are gaffes, right? He's just mentally broken down.
Of that capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they should go, how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do.
So that was just bad, right? Like he's lost, and it's been accepted. This has been accepted over the years. But his mental capacity is not there. He's clueless.
Good question related to...
deer in headlights. And so he forgot the second part of the question.
Bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or on some matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done?
This is bad because you reassure somebody based on what they need to hear from you, not what you think they need to hear. Like this is all myopic Trump stuff, right? The stuff they accuse Trump of being narcissistic and self-serving. You don't tell people, mansplain why you're not senile by the work that you've done. That's what he's been doing over and over again. And the way to do it would be cognitive tests, which he's going to lie about here coming up. But, if he wants to reassure the American people, it's not, them looking at his record and his decision-making. It's looking at his, the way he presents, right? There's a difference between your accomplishments and your resume and the way that you present. When you come in as to a counseling situation, you look at the counselor, the person doing the assessment, the psychological assessment says this person presents as this. And this is what the doctor was talking about in terms of his, his walk and his stiff, not being able to turn and all these, terms he had, these terms that had to do with Parkinson's, right? He doesn't spin around, he spins around with a very stiff whole body spin, his shuffling feet. He had names for all these things, right? Because he was the experts have their own lingo, and he demonstrates all the symptoms of having Parkinson's.
You name me somebody who's got more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week.
Just last week I did 2,000 jobs. I did it. Me, myself, and I. And so he keeps on saying this. Name me a person. Name me a person. Name me a person that does this and did that. That's Trump stuff, right?
So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None.
No indication. Zero indication. So we already know the reason that we're having a conversation here is because there's an indication. There was the debate, there was the interview that went really poorly, and now this that's going poorly. And they can say, well, it didn't go as bad as the debate, which isn't true. These are all different events. But this is how Joe Biden is now, right? There's plenty of indication. People have been documenting this since 2019.
Who I got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Okay, what's his first name or last name? Look at how confused he is. He can't handle these. This is as easy as it could be. Imagine if he had to remember these people's names and faces and pick them out from like it'd be a disaster. Yelling, "Hey, buddy, what about George Clooney?"
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
I'm well. This fake smile. That just, I mean, he's so annoying, like so fake, so political. His like reptilian smile. Like he's always been this way. He's a real scumbag, a real piece of shit. And people, there are Republicans that really think he's great. Even, especially before the election with Trump, but this is...
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States.
Yeah, of course. What is he going to say? He's a senile fuck and get rid of him? Like what?
But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election.
How much money do you pay this guy to bring up Trump and throw him under the bus and say?
And there's a lot of concern that...
like this is the kind of question he wants to hear, leading in to talk about NATO and how he's better than Trump and these things.
Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push
Look at how happy he is with this question.
Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And
They're correct. Like he's loving this, right? Like this is a complete shill.
Yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look.
Are you serious? That's your question? Like, this is the guy you picked? Like, it's just people watching this, the insiders know that this is completely a shill, right? And, like, he's being handled. This has been released. The White House press corps has released all this stuff, right? That, they have completely monitored his schedule, and they're handling him completely.
I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving?
You sound self-serving all the time. All you do is brag about your stuff, much like Trump. I mean, he's Trump, but like worse and better, I guess, in some ways, but worse than most, because he's a bad version of Trump. Like he's not as good being Trump is being Trump.
I'm not having any of my European allies come up to me and say, "Joe, don't run." What I hear them say...
Why would they say that? Why would they say that?
You've got to win.
You got to win. They don't say, "Joe, don't run." They say, "Joe, you got to win. Win, Joe, win. Win, Joe. Run, Forrest, run."
You can't let this guy come forward. He'd be a disaster.
He'd be a disaster.
He'd be a disaster.
He'd be a disaster. I said it once, I said it twice.
I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO, or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you, from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what
Let me touch my face here.
I can say is,
it's my face.
I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO.
Okay, this is where no one knows what the fuck he's talking about here.
I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, etc. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, as you're going to get the NATOization of Finland.
Just he got him with that riddle.
And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. That's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? In my office. I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked.
Okay, so he called you so that you could invite him? Like what? This doesn't make any sense. Oh, it's 2 weeks later. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry, that's not true. 5 months later, he called me and I invited him to the Oval Office.
He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic.
It wasn't automatic.
And then I got a call from the Swedes.
Swedes.
I beg your pardon?
He's confused.
And so Finland joined NATO. 800-mile border is a significant, and they're already allies, but they weren't.
So it's important to remember here that the reason that Russia went to war with the Ukraine is that Biden was pushing for the Ukraine to join NATO. And once they were joining NATO, like he started off saying, you know, once they attack one, they attack all. Because if they attack one of us, all of us will respond. And so that's a deterrent because, you know, he kept on repeating it, perseveration, right? But he was blaming Putin for the war, but it's his fault. If Trump was president, this wouldn't happen because Trump was anti-NATO and wanted to make all the NATO members pay, you know, their fair share. And all the responsibility falls on America, right? I mean, in terms of a war, these other countries can't do shit. They're small countries. You know, 10 million people in the country or whatever, 15 million people. I mean, so some of these European countries, they have barely a military. And so, you know, the heavy lifting always falls on America. And so it's America having to defend Europe is what it is. And America gets financial, you know, gets to be the world reserve currency and other things. That's the whole deal that was struck. But, you know, like he's not being honest about why there's a war in Ukraine, which is on him for provoking it by wanting Ukraine to join NATO.
Part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe, I can't recall whether he said it publicly in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade.
Look at the fist, the power of the fist.
Any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling.
So, like, what is he talking about here, right? What are you talking about? You know, and so this whole thing that, you know, Russia was not happy to have Ukraine be a member of NATO because they would put missiles in Ukrainian, you know, on the Russian border, which would be easy strike for Americans. That would be first thing. And the other thing would be Ukraine could be aggressive with Russia and Russia couldn't act out against them because it would mean World War III. And so that's what provoked this war. Nothing else. I mean, other little considerations. But Obama had a hard-on for, you know, Clinton and Obama had a hard-on for Russia. You know, Russia, the Russian hacking. And they're, you know, what they did in Syria when Russia war-blocked America. And they've been pushing for war with Russia now for years. And this was, you know, the next step. And it's going to happen. There's going to be World War III. And whatever, they've provoked this, right? And you got the senile candidate, if he ends up being president again, and, you know, they start allowing the Ukrainians to bomb Moscow, well then, you know, Russia's going to respond against America at some point. And China will probably be involved, and then it's World War III.
To some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations.
50 other nations.
50, 5-0. To support Ukraine. 50.
50.
And we were able to bring about a coalition of Europe and
Yeah, so 90% of the weapons and the money's coming from America.
Asia.
So that's like, yeah, 50, but they're, giving $50, right? Yeah.
Japan and South Korea. I just we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world. The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest I have a pretty good idea what that should be.
I do. It's me.
I've convinced a lot of people to follow it. And we're just going to get stronger. David Sanger. Where's it?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Look at his face.
Be nice, David.
Be nice, David. Ask the question we sent to you to ask.
The NATO declaration that was issued yesterday.
Again with the NATO crap. Nobody gives a shit about NATO, right? They think this guy's senile. His party's turning on him, and the news media's turning on him. They're pressuring him to withdraw, and you're talking about something that he wants to talk about. He hasn't had a press conference since like the beginning of his presidency. He's showing signs of Parkinson's and dementia, whatever it is, whatever your interpretation of it is. They're not even asking him about Parkinson's and the neurological testing and things like this, right? And they're asking about, no one cares about NATO. Yeah, this is about NATO, but it's not, this is a horrible, this is why the press corps is pulling their hair out. These questions are lame. They're hand-picked people, picked in order.
It was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi, that a few years from now you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Horrible question. He sticks this dementia thing like, oh, you're breaking down mentally. But they do it in the most subtle way. Say the American people think you have dementia. They think you're, breaking down mentally. There's cognitive, neurological issues here. And lots of people see it. There's experts out there talking about it. And so say something like that, not this NATO crap, right? Do you think you'll be able to handle Putin in China in 3 years? Because the answer is going to be yes. Of course I am. Yeah, you've seen him before. I did before. By the way.
Well, the first part of the question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit, and others raised, the future of China's involvement, what they're going to do.
So what are you looking at? And, there is a teleprompter there because he read off of it at the beginning.
What they're doing with Russia in terms of accommodating, facilitating, they're getting access to additional, they're not supplying weapons themselves. They're supplying mechanisms for them to be able to get weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through.
90 hours, me and Xi, like we hang out, we party.
And by the way, I handed all my notes.
By the way.
But my point is that...
I handed all my notes. By the way.
Xi believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for
What's she's pronouns?
Commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we cannot, we have to make clear China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where, and we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down?
Yeah, we remember that balloon thing. Do you remember it? The balloon? The balloon. I remember the balloon.
All of a sudden, things came to an end.
Came to an
Well, we set up a new mechanism.
Mechanism.
There's a direct line between
Look at the fist. Power of the fist.
she and me,
She and me.
and our
23
military
and me.
has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that she understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe, and as it relates to Russia and dealing with Ukraine. And so we, for example,
So this was prepared. Like he was going to give this answer. That's a shell question, and he's trying to deliver, like a pre-scripted answer, and he can't do it. He's confused, and the ordinary American isn't going to want to follow. I mean, it's so laborious trying to follow this guy.
if you want to invest in China, as you know this area really well. If you want to invest in China, you have to have a 51% Chinese owner. You have to make sure that you do by their rules. And you don't have the authority, and you have to provide all access to all the data and information you have. There was a while there, as you recall, the last administration and other administrations, where the access to that market was enticing enough to get companies to come in because they had access to over 1 billion people in a market, not 1 billion, but a lot of people in the market.
You mean China's billion population?
And so they were doing it. But that got curtailed when we started saying we're going to play by the same rules.
This is stuff that Trump always says, the tariffs that Trump has put on China.
For example, the idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world.
We're just doing it, just following my lead. I mean Trump's lead, I mean my lead.
But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past, looking to figure out how they can have impact.
Interrupt that impact?
Yes, I do, but I'm not prepared to talk about the detail of it in public.
But then he's going to reveal the detail. Here's the detail.
And I think you'll see that some of our European friends are going to be curtailing their investment in Russia. In China.
Again with the gaff.
As long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to...
So it's like basically an economic sanction against China that he's been talking about here at NATO. And now he said it's a secret, but then he just revealed what it is. That he's going to get these other countries not to invest in China until they stop supporting Russia in the Ukrainian war. Which is, again, like you said you weren't going to say anything, and now you just said it.
Help their economy as well as help them in, as a consequence of that, their ability to fight in...
Like there's just no confidence in this guy. He's just babbling on, and he's incoherent.
In Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and I didn't hear any, I can't swear that everyone agreed because not everyone got to talk about it, but we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example, we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity to provide for weapons and the ability to, it came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new.
So you're saying there are weapons that are being built in China, right?
Everything from vehicles to weapon systems. And so one of the things that came out of this was we're going to be meeting again with a number of my colleagues, my European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able.
So this is where he just starts babbling. From here on out, he's gone like to where he's unaware of what's going on, right? He's my dog's throwing up right now. Okay, so my dog Buddy jumped off the bed and started a dry heave. Forgot where I was, but I just want to say this. You know, the goal of this press conference is to assure American people that he gets it, he's competent, and he's performing for them. And rambling on endlessly about things that people don't know what the fuck you're talking about is not that, right? It's the opposite of that. Things that people don't care about. And, you know, it just shows you he's clueless, which is the whole point. Like he doesn't get it, right? He doesn't get it.
Able to generate kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. Not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that. It's the same, it's what Russia's trying to figure out. That they went to China and they didn't get the weapons, but then they went to North Korea. But we're going to be in a position where the West is going to become the industrial base for it to be able to, the ability to have all the defensive weapons that we need. That was.
You mean military-industrial complex? Is that what you're saying?
Was a discussion as well.
President, I'm not sure you answered on whether you would be ready to go deal with Putin and Xi 2 or 3 years from now.
I'm ready to deal with them now and 3 years from now. Look,
Okay, so that's not the question. The question is, you're fucked in the head, and you're going to be worse in 3 years, and you know we all see it. You don't. Like that's the question. Why can't you see it?
Like I said, I'm dealing with Xi right now. And
Okay, so that's not the question. The question's about senility, and you just demonstrated being senile.
Contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now.
No reason. Just World War
There's
III.
not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior. And but there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with.
Except for Putin.
But I understand the generic point.
But I'll deal with Putin when I call him Zelensky.
Is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. And the idea, look, Putin's got a problem.
Yeah, you got a problem. And the bitch ain't one. You got 99 problems. And they're all Parkinson's related.
First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think
he won the war. Russia's won this war.
Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they.
So almost 1/5 of Ukraine, Russia has won, which isn't the whole country, but he's decimated the Ukrainian. I mean, it's brutal. There's no people to fight anymore. He's decimated their youth. They've been destroyed by this thing, right?
Conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory. They've not been very successful. They've caused horrible damage, loss of life, but they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people.
Yeah, I think that's exaggerated.
Particularly young people with technical capability, leaving Russia because they see no future there. They've got a problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running the public outcry that relates to how they use mechanisms to communicate with people.
You mean manipulating the population?
They lie like hell to the constituencies.
No, you guys never lie. Like, all you do is lie. Politicians lie all the time. Politicians tell you what you want to hear. They never tell you what the truth is, or they never be themselves. They're inauthentic, right? And he's one of the worst. Plagiarizing, making up stories, saying things that he knows that, sell, these taglines and things that gather votes, and they campaign to the stupidest people, right? The people that are most easily deceived, and he's one of the worst at it, right? But they're all bad. Trump is horrible too.
They lie like hell about what's going on, and so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, if we allow Russia to...
This is nothing to do with this is zero to do with what was the question was, right? And it's nothing that people want to hear. The question was about China supporting Russia and what they're going to do about it. And is he able to meet with these leaders, right? And able in 3 years from now, because he's breaking down mentally. And he's just showing you that he can't because he's totally off. He's clueless. He's just clueless, right?
To succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this.
That's not true. The only reason they're in Ukraine is because of him and his policies and him, pushing Ukraine into NATO, which caused Russia, which I've already talked about.
Because you've written about it. Read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is.
Anyway.
And anyway. So I think that...
That's when you realize he's rambling, but it's usually 10 minutes too late.
I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants...
He starts getting lost and he forgets what he's talking about and why this even started, right?
Talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk. Last time I talked to Putin...
This wasn't about whether you would be willing to talk to leaders. This was about whether you'll be able to do it in 3 years because you're senile. You have dementia, you have Parkinson's.
Was trying to get him to work on an arms control agreement related to nuclear weapons in space. That didn't go very far.
Space Force.
So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me. Because they're not sure
I'm on their payroll, remember?
And look what's happened in Asia. We have strengthened the Asian Pacific area more than anyone else has.
Here's a major gaffe here.
We just put together with, today I brought on, I asked our NATO allies that we bring on a group from the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. I already mentioned Australia.
You said it twice, right? I'm not senile. Like, I said it twice and I recognized that I said it twice. He's just babbling, right? He's clueless.
And I met twice now, I think, with the 14 leaders of the Pacific Island nations. And we've slowed down what's going on there. We've slowed down.
What are you talking about? Like, what would slow down what's going on there? Specifically, why are you talking about this, bro?
China's reach. But there's a lot of work to do. This is a moving target. And
you just call China a moving target?
I don't take it lightly. Assam from NPR.
Thank you, Mr. President. Asma Khalid with NPR.
So he said Assam from NPR, and she said Asma Khalid. So he said he got lost. He forgot, what place he was at, and he mispronounces the woman's name. He said Assam, and she said Asma Khalid. So he wasn't going to be able to pronounce her name. Why would they even do that to him? They're handpicking these people. He's all clueless. Look at his frickin' face here. Like, it's a disaster. And, some of it's subtle. But, of course, the lack of time limits and him babbling on endlessly, right, because of the debate he had time limits, has, he has a different, this is a different level of suck for him, different level of dementia,
I have two questions.
expression of his dementia.
Earlier, you spoke about the ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious if there's anything that you feel personally you wish you would have done differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a moment where you referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
All right, so somebody asked Karine Jean-Pierre this same question, and she pushed back against it, saying he never said it. But he did say it. And this is when I knew that this was staged. I mean, there's all these other signs. But he has this answer ready to go. You're going to hear him. He's obviously prepared for this answer. Because, he hadn't thought about it, right? And the reason is, like, he lied and said that he is a transition candidate just so that you would realize if he felt like he was too old, he'd be willing to step down later on and give way to a new generation after he took care of Trump. Like, that would be the truth of it, but he was lying anyway, right? And so he's already has this answer. The second part of this question, you'll hear it.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement. The answer is, as you recall, from the very beginning.
When the questions are, they're putting the ball on a tee for him, then they're, questions that are pre-scripted and they're easy for him. And they're not challenging questions. And so it's putting him in his comfort zone. This whole thing was to put him in his comfort zone. Having reporters yell at him and then ask him over and over about George Clooney until he answered it, or have them continuously ask the questions over and over again, like Stephanopoulos did, until he gets a real answer, does not help him, does not put him in his comfort zone, right?
I went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with Al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the King of Jordan. I met with most of the Arab leaders to try to get a consensus going as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard. And Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet,
Yeah, they suck, right? And, they've been horrible. The amount of kids that have died there and all these things. And this is another thing he's lost because the youth, the college level youth, is really upset by the way he's dealt with Israel. I mean, this is an ongoing issue. And they were the people that helped carry him if he did actually win those, he got those votes. It's because of those people, those young people coming out to be anti-Trump, but now they hate him because of his allowing a genocide to happen in Israel. So this is another way he's losing ground, right?
I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. Some of the reporters around here cover me all the time have heard me say this. First time I met with Golda Meir, I said...
The first time you met with her? How many first times did you have? How many first times did you have with her?
And across from her at her desk, and her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me. That's how far back I go. I know Israel.
Yeah, that's why you're senile, because you're ancient as fuck, right? That's all this.
Israel well, and I support Israel. But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here.
And they'll never, Israel wants Gaza, they want the West Bank, and then they want the other parts of the greater Israel that was promised to them in the Bible. That's, part of it, right? And the Christians, the evangelicals want the same thing.
And so what was able to be done...
It's supposed, to them, it's God's will.
In terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for two-state...
It's a process. It's not going to happen immediately. It's a process.
Solution. And we get the Arab nations to, particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without...
See, this makes him look presidential, like he thinks. Like he has a plan. but he's just so bad at delivering it. But this is not the kind of questions that the media wants, the real media. I mean, there's no real media, but not these staged fools that he has. They want to know about Dementiagate, right? They want to know about him having Parkinson's. They want to know about what he feels about George Clooney and these other people that are now bailing on him.
Without Israeli forces staying in Gaza, the question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel on the Gaza Strip, as well as the ability for us to get in and out as rapidly as you can, all that's needed there. I've been disappointed that some of the things that I've put forward have not succeeded as well, like the port reattached.
I think you just said the port reattached.
I was hopeful that would be more successful. But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas.
Okay, so you realize now, whatever the numbers they said that happened October 7th or whatever it was, has been eclipsed by the 40, 50,000 dead Palestinians and the ones that are suffering from lack of aid, lack of food, the power and water being turned off, no internet, no way to communicate. They're suffering there, as well as the death of children, 25,000 children. He droned kids in Afghanistan. I mean, it's just like heartless stuff, right? The economic sanctions in Russia and other places that make children starve.
The one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall, I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on.
Okay, so this is ridiculous.
Because it was not no one's ever going to unite that country. I've been over every inch of that, not every inch, the entirety from the poppy fields all the way to the north.
You were checking out the poppy fields? You went to the poppy fields. All right, there's a lot here. So this shows how much of a liar he is, but more it's about cognitive decline. And so he voted for the war in Iraq. He voted for the invasion of Afghanistan, and then the related things to do with Syria that Obama administration did. And so he's saying that they shouldn't have occupied that area after they got bin Laden. But it was already too late. The war had already started in 2003, right? 2002, 2003. That was Iraq. I mean, we invaded Iraq for no reason in 2003, right? But in 2001 is when we went into Afghanistan. And not me, Hawaii, but America. And so America military goes into Afghanistan in 2001. Then 2011, I believe, is when bin Laden, 2011, 10 years later, America supposedly kills bin Laden. And America had already occupied those two countries, Afghanistan and Iraq. America had built military bases, and Biden had approved all those things. Some of it was under Obama, and most of it was under Bush, and he voted for that. So he's coming out and saying that he didn't want to occupy those countries. But, there's a few other things about this. So going into Afghanistan is a place where it has destroyed empires. Going back to Alexander the Great and Russia, the Russian Empire collapsed because of the amount of money they spend in Afghanistan. It's this mountainous area with a lot of warlike people, all tribal. And it's impossible to occupy that country and get some unity and have some governmental, like federal government in that country, because there's all these divided people that speak different languages and they're very, tribal and warlike, right? But at the time, there was no opioid market because the Taliban were anti-opium. And America goes into Afghanistan for no real reason, because bin Laden then fled to Pakistan, and America couldn't go into Pakistan because China has a strong relationship with Pakistan. And so bin Laden's hiding out, allegedly in some caves in Pakistan, even though he has got kidney failure. He's 6'5". He wears a white outfit and can be seen from drones and satellite dishes walking around, right? Supposedly at these mountainous camps. But the guy needed luxury. He comes from a billionaire family, and he's an asset. He was always been a CIA asset. CIA trained him to fight against Saddam Hussein in the original Iraqi war. And so, like, that's all a bunch of lies. It's the same thing with, ISIS and these controlled, false flaggy type of organizations, right? But Biden voted for all this. And when we went into Afghanistan, there was this guy, he was a former member of the Sajmark system I used to do, the Gratefullness debacle. And this guy was, was in Vietnam, and he had his own meltdown where he just started posting like crazy stuff about Trump. He like went nuts and was obsessed with Trump. But he asked a question on Facebook back when I interact with all these people. And he said, well, if the Iraq war was based in oil, why did we go into Afghanistan? And everyone gave their stupid answers. And I said, well, because opium, the opioid fields, the poppy fields that he just talked about, there was an opium epidemic that happened after we went into Afghanistan. And the same thing happened in Vietnam. My brother guarded opium fields for the CIA. Because the CIA has to do these off-book operations. And so they use drug money to fund them because they don't want to get federal money. So there'll be Freedom of Information Act talking about these things that they're doing, right? The black operations they're doing. So they sell drugs, right? And the opioid epidemic is a part of that, with the opium coming out of Afghanistan after they got rid of the Taliban. And so, now I guess they're in Australia or someplace, but the same thing happened in Vietnam. And so, I said opium is, for like a gram of opium or, an ounce of opium is worth a gallon of oil, a barrel of oil, right? Like when they import these barrels of oil for $70 or whatever it is, right? And so it's more profitable. And so America was already occupying these countries. And then they made up this crap that they found bin Laden. They took his body, dumped it in the ocean, which was like sacrilegious and made no sense. And SEAL Team 6 that took care of bin Laden all died in a helicopter accident, right? And so the whole thing was BS, right? And Biden was behind all of it. Like Biden signed off on all these things. He voted for all these things. And now he's coming in and saying, oh, I'm telling them don't occupy them because we learned about that. No, you were occupying them for 11 years, and then you had to get out of Afghanistan, and you turned over billions of dollars in resources to the Taliban, who now are more empowered than ever. It was a disaster, and a disaster you fully participated in, and now he's trying to rearrange history. And either he completely, is lying, but also misremembering things because his brain is gone, right? Both things are true, because he's a liar, and he can't keep his lies straight because his brain doesn't work well enough. So he just makes up things all the time. It's something that they accuse Trump of, right?
I said, don't make the same mistake we made. Don't think that's what you should be doing, is doubling down. We'll help you find the bad guys, Sinwar and company. And
the bad guys. We'll find the bad guys. Who's got the bad guys?
And all this criticism about I wouldn't provide when the weapons they needed. I'm not providing them 2,000-pound bombs. They cannot be used in Gaza or any populated area without causing great human tragedy and
But that's
damage.
why we have them. That's why we have them.
But remember what happened when you had the attack on Israel with rockets and ballistic missiles. I was able to unite the Arab nations as well as Europe, and nothing happened. Nothing
happened. Like, it's just like no one knows what he's talking about, right? Like if you're saying things to people that they don't know they don't understand what you're saying or why you're saying it, and it's certainly not responding to their question, then you have cognitive issues. And he's done this whole debate,
He got hurt.
this whole press conference.
It sent an incredible lesson to what was going on from the Middle East. So there's a lot of things.
What lesson was that? Like, he's just lost.
In retrospect, I wish I had been able to convince the Israelis to do. But the bottom line is we have a chance now. It's time to end this war. Doesn't mean walk away from going after Sinwar and Hamas. And if you notice, you know better than most, there is a growing dissatisfaction on the West Bank from the Palestinians about Hamas. Hamas is not popular now. And so there's a lot of moving parts. I just have to keep moving to make sure that we get as much done as we can toward a ceasefire. A ceasefire.
Ceasefire. Ceasefire. Say it 3 times. It's like Beetlejuice.
And get those. And by the way, look at the numbers.
Look at the numbers
in Israel. I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway.
My numbers aren't very good here, because of being senile and everything. But I don't care about that in Israel. I don't know, guys. They like me being senile.
Bridge candidacy in 2020, you referred to yourself as...
So this is a staged answer. Watch him go here. But he forgot she asked the second part of the question.
being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
She's looking through, I have an answer for this. What is it?
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited.
So first he blames it on Trump. So this is prepared, right?
In terms of the economy, our foreign policy, and domestic division. And
I was going to be a bridge candidate. I was just going to come in and then pass the torch to these younger people. But then I realized, hey, I kind of like being president, and Jill really likes being first lady, and, Oh, no, that's not the answer. The answer is it's Trump's fault.
I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth. Most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that.
Yeah, I've been the greatest president. I mean, look at how great I am.
Major piece of legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate.
Remember, he talked about that already. He's perseverating. He's bringing back his long time in the Senate.
Had equipped me to have the wisdom to know how to deal with the Congress, to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it.
No one did. No one thought of what, and that's, that's why I did it, because they said no one can do it. I said I'd do it.
To get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along. Anyway.
So, he lost his laughter, but he had an answer ready to go. Like he had something ready to go for that, right? And he didn't just do that off the cuff because he can't do that anymore. These are pre-scripted questions. He got the questions ahead of time. He still fumbled. He's still failing.
It's going to change.
Last question.
It's going to change.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry, was the next one. I'll do 2 more questions.
But you just said 1. What happened? Look at that. Look at him. That's a clueless MNF. That's a guy with, he just deer in headlights, right? The way he looks and turns and his mechanical, he's a stiff person syndrome, right?
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of your colleagues, Democrats on the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of this right now. It seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way about how the next week or 2 goes would inform your...
Am I using that way, you say?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision, or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see them out, for the longest time it was.
Now he's just babbling, right?
Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway.
Anyway.
And so what I'm doing is, and I've been doing.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro?
I think we've done over 20 major events, from Wisconsin to North Carolina, anyway, to demonstrate that I'm going out in the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. And here, look, the other thing is, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers.
Well, anyway.
Knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls. We have headquarters. I forget exactly how many. I don't want to cite a number and then find out I'm off. But we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states.
So one of the things that people were saying after this was that when he talked to George Stephanopoulos, he said, "I'm shutting this down. I'm the nominee, period. No one's saying this to me. It's over. Let's focus on Trump." And now with all the doubt and the people saying things behind closed doors and these things, and now George Clooney, he's saying he's still trying to prove it to people, right? And so, like, it's, he tried to shut it down. He couldn't. I don't think he's withdrawing, but, this is bad. And he's just babbling right now, like he's lost it. He's been on the stage for too long. He's getting more and more confused. He's like loses himself in the answers. Even though they're pre-scripted, he knows what he was supposed to say. He can't hold it together because, he has deterioration of his neurological deterioration and brain functioning, right?
We're organized, we're moving, and that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And so, and here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done in the Senate.
I was in the Senate a long time. So he just said that this is the third time saying it, right? And this he's going to say again what he said before, that he understands them freaking out down ticket.
I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. Anyway, I'm going to be going around making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights.
He's got to make the case right now. He's got to make the case for why he needs to be elected. But, the other person's going to do what he did. Kamala would run on the same agenda. They're not going to abolish his policies. And so the next person can do it.
Liberties, women's rights, there's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls.
And so you're saying...
The idea, we're sitting around, this is where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around, more children are killed by a bullet than any other cause of death.
It's accidents are number one cause of death of children. My wife fact-checked him right in the middle of that thing.
The United States of America. What the hell are we doing?
So he's talking about abortion and women's rights to, terminate a baby, to kill a baby, a fetus. But then he talks about bullets killing babies and kids, right? Like, it's just, it's so batshit crazy, the whole thing.
What are we doing?
What are we doing?
We got a candidate saying, promise the NRA, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. You got a Supreme Court that is what you might call the most conservative court in American history. This is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
There's so much we can do still. And I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom.
It's about freedom.
And by the way, I'll end this. Well, I'm not going to do that.
No, I got another person because I screwed up
too. But I remember I made a speech on democracy.
I made a stinky in my diapers.
In Philadelphia, at Independence Hall. And I'm not being critical, just observing. The bulk of the press said, what the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy is not an issue. Democracy is not an issue. Except the polling data showed 60% of the people knew I was right, thought I was right. I'm not asking you a question.
60% of people knew more than the press corps did because the American people are so smart, especially ones that go to Walmart. And the thing is that they rigged 2 primaries for him against Bernie Sanders. And this last one, they didn't allow, one was for Clinton. They rigged it for Clinton against Bernie, him for Bernie, and then him for, they didn't let RFK Jr. run. So that's not democracy, right?
You don't have to answer, obviously. But do you think our democracy is under siege?
Do you? Do you see it?
Based on this court?
By this court?
Do you think democracy is under siege based on Project 2025?
2025?
Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service?
Civil service?
Eliminate the Department of Education?
Department of Education?
Make sure,
Come on.
We've never been here before.
Anyways.
And that's the other reason why you say, hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job.
I got to finish the job.
I've got to finish this job.
I got to do it.
Because there's so much at stake.
So much at stake, it's the same job.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
So he's going to lie about this because to George Stephanopoulos, and I'd pull it up, but this thing's already too long. But he said to George Stephanopoulos, he didn't need a cognitive exam, and if he needed one, he'd take one, if a doctor said it. But now he's saying, because they realized that there was a guy who specializes in Parkinson that came into the White House at least 8 times, but maybe as many as 12. And now they're saying 3 of those times was to see Biden. So now he's going to say he hasn't had a neurological exam, but it isn't a real one. It isn't the kind that would test for Parkinson's because they already know he has it, right? They're not giving him one because he would fail.
Well, look, 2 things. 1, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist.
Again, lying about what he said. 2 different stories for George Stephanopoulos, but they're not going to call him on this, right?
In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay?
That's we're not seeing, no one believes that, right?
I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot.
No, we're worried about your frickin' cognitive abilities, not your frickin' foot, you moron.
But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot.
Dude, it's very chatty.
But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff and I said, I'm going to go to South Korea, we're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing
I'm
age
great.
does
Like, what the fuck are you talking about, right?
is help you with creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is,
Yeah, and also senility, right?
I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way,
There's a neurologist saying that you have Parkinson's. There was one on MSNBC or CNN that I covered, multiple doctors saying you should be tested for this and not some bogus test that you and Trump got, but a real test done by an independent person who would say that you are unfit to serve and you'd have to step down because of your deterioration, right?
If the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out. Hadn't hidden a thing.
Well, you said you didn't even have those tests, and now you say you have. And all of a sudden, somebody discovered that there was a neurologist, a Parkinson's specialist that came into the White House, and you guys lied about it, and you've changed your story 10 times.
You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out.
He's laid it on the line.
And every single day, I'm surrounded by good docs.
Good docs.
If they think there's a problem,
they'll tell me.
I promise you. Or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it.
I'll do it.
No one's suggesting that to me now.
You said first
I'll
you said
ask
he
another
wouldn't do
question.
it. Now he said he would.
No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied.
No one's going to be satisfied.
Did you have 7 docs? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this?
No,
How
just
many
take
times
one independent test and fail and
I
leave.
am not opposed. If my doctors tell me I should have another neurological exam, I'll do it. But that's where I am. Haley Bull, Scripps.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting restrictions for U.S.-made weapons
Again,
inside
another
Russia?
crappy question.
And if I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I get overwhelming support.
Overwhelming support.
Overwhelming support.
Overwhelming.
I won. I forget how many votes I won in the primary.
16 million, 14 million.
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming support.
And so tomorrow, if all of a
It's the
sudden I
rigged
show up at
primary.
the convention, everybody says we want somebody else, That's the democratic process.
That's the democratic process.
It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure.
Sure, they can do that. They have to do that.
I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time.
Again, the third time. This is the fourth time you said this.
I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office.
You just said this in the beginning statement.
Whether they think the topic they can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a
They got more
very,
corporations there anywhere.
at least a it was a red state when I started.
Yeah.
In terms of where you now talk red and blue. I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. The truth of the matter is I understand the self-interest of a candidate. If they think that, running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get
Run
it.
away. Run away from
But
Biden.
so far,
That's what they say. Run away from Biden.
go and look at the polling data in their states.
Even though I didn't believe the polls
Look
when they
at
said
the
70%
in-depth-
of
and
people
by the
said I
way,
shouldn't run.
I think you'd all acknowledge, and you're all experts. I'm not being solicitous about the president. You're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days?
Yeah, I don't.
I can give you
Especially now that they're going
polls
against
where
me.
you have likely voters, me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. The bottom line is all the
I don't
polling
know.
data right now,
That's
which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started.
Yeah.
I mean, it hadn't started in earnest yet. Most of the time, it doesn't start till after September, after Labor Day.
Labor Day.
So
I don't know.
a lot can happen.
I don't know. That could happen.
But I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern.
I'm just going to govern.
And I think I'm the best qualified to win.
To win. I think.
But there are other people who could beat Trump too.
Well, they could beat
But
him
it's
too.
awful start from scratch.
Start from scratch.
And, we talk about, money raised.
Money raised.
We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank.
We're
doing well. So, with that, you have any more
fundraising
follow-up on any
dies.
of
It's
that?
a
You
big
just asked
debate.
me.
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win.
And then I can do that. So I'm going to
Me.
stay in. Me, wouldn't.
No one's saying that.
No one's saying
No poll says that.
No polls say that.
Okay. Thank you.
This is it right here. Run, MNFer. Get out of there. You suck.
Everybody.
Okay, just leave. Just leave. Get out of there. Okay.
This concludes.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
I should have left.
Listen to him.
Listen to him.
This concludes
Look, he
tonight's
shuffles off. Look
Thank
at this
you, everybody.
shuffle. Look at this inability. Look at this walk. Look at this MNFer. Run, motherfucker, run. Okay, so this is a 3-hour video. I'm going to get it up as quick as possible here. So I don't need to say much more. I mean, it's obvious what's going on here. The guy's a disaster. He's not going to withdraw. The Democrats, with each one of these events, the people in power are, the so-called Democratic elite and the Hollywood elite and even the media now, the press corps, CNN to some extent. Certainly Fox is celebrating, but CNN and MSNBC is struggling with both sides of the equation. CNN is more, there to say he needs to leave. They're all pulling their hair out and freaking out because he ain't going, and he keeps on showing signs of Parkinson's, dementia, and all of these things, right? You can't do it, but he refused to acknowledge it, and they don't know what to do. And every minute that this goes on is a disaster for him and the Democrats. And so it's, quite wonderful. Only spirituality will save this world, as Paul Romano definitely pointed for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.